Chapter 2334. Quick! Tu Hong shouted. He pointed his finger once more, and a yellow light shot out from the trirhombus mirror, turning into a rectangular light screen. Dwarves? So they were dwarves! This old man thought they were sword cultivators. On the light screen, the images of 3 dwarves were reflected. At this time, Lan Xian also hurried in. She anxiously said, Hi General, hi General. But as he saw the light screen projected into the air, he stopped, his eyes flashing with anxiety. Tu Hong didn't bother with Lan Xian. Instead, he urged the mirror to slowly rotate. Gradually, the bird cultivator Ing Chao's face also flashed on the light screen. Ing Chao's complexion was as ugly as Lan Xian's. It seemed that after hearing the dwarf's report, he was unable to make a decision. Eh? Ing Chao, who was standing on the light screen, was startled. A sharp light flashed in his eyes as he waved his hand, turning it into an eagle's wing that streaked across the air. Immediately, Tu Hong's light screen turned into a blur, destroying Tu Hong's light screen that was moving towards Ling Yunwu. Hee. Tu Hong wasn't surprised. He slapped his hand, hitting the trirhombus mirror. The mirror gradually shrank, turning into a small triangle that fell into his hand. Tu Hong looked up at Lan Xian and smiled. Old brother Lan, you also saw it? This old man received a report from a disciple that went out to kill a sword cultivator. As soon as I learned that dwarves had appeared, I immediately came back to report. Lan Xian forced a smile. Dwarves. I don't know how many years it has been since they've appeared in the Huan Nation. There are records of dwarves in Sky Patrol City. Tu Hong didn't seem particularly surprised. But it's not particularly detailed. I didn't look at it carefully. I only know that dwarves are born with the ability to escape through the earth, but I don't know anything else. Hi General, you should take a good look. Lan Xian knew that it was useless to say more, but she still complained. Hi General, you guard Golden Spring Mountain, you should know more about the Huan Nation. If it weren't for the fact that I wanted to see if there was any secret technique that Yu Meng had, I fear that I wouldn't even know about this. Tu Hong didn't hide his purpose. Since the dwarves have appeared, the underground defensive array of my Golden Spring Mountain, I'm afraid it won't be as optimistic as we thought. Lan Xian thought for a moment and then said, Although I don't know whether or not this dwarf can break through this array formation, we still have to take precautions. Yes, this too naturally knows. Tu Hong nodded, and then his face turned solemn, saying, Just now, that bird cultivator discovered this too's spying, but I didn't see the face of the sword cultivator beside him. However, it seems that the sword cultivator's cultivation isn't low. He's either a grade 6 brilliant sword or a grade 1 illusory sword. If he's only a grade 1 illusory sword, it'll be troublesome. Will an illusory sword cultivator appear? Lan Xian frowned as she heard this. My Dao Sec's Golden Core cultivator hasn't even made a move yet, but the sword cultivator's illusory swordsman. As Lan Xian spoke to hear, she stopped. Obviously, she was thinking of Qin Jian. Since Qin Jian, who was at the illusory sword realm, could kill a Dao Sec disciple, it wasn't strange for an illusory swordsman to appear here. Old brother Lan, arrange for some trusted disciples to bring Yu Meng to a safe place. Tu Hong pondered for a moment, and ordered. Ah? Lan Xian was stunned. However, he was only stunned for a moment. He bowed and said, This old man understands. But just as he turned around, he stopped and asked in a low voice. Also, do you want to send several female disciples of the Dao sect to go with her? This? Tu Hong hesitated for a moment and then nodded. Old brother Lan, you can arrange it as you see fit. As long as they don't become suspicious, it's fine. Haha, I asked General to rest assured. Lan Xian turned and quickly walked away. Looking at Lan Xian's departing figure, Tu Hong had a relieved expression on his face. He whispered to himself, Yu Meng, as long as you are safe, then this too can rest assured. Just you wait. In a few years you will be able to restore yourself to how you were before. This, too, will be able to fulfill the blood oath I made in the past. Not to mention Tu Hong's arrangements at Golden Spring Mountain, Ling Yunwu was anxiously waiting at the top of Golden Spring Mountain. All of a sudden, he saw 3 bird-type cultivators carrying 3 dwarves with pale faces flying over. He immediately flew over and shouted, "Have you found any sword cultivators?" Who would have thought that the 3 dwarves would be so scared that their courage had been broken? Their mouths were tightly shut, not saying a single word. Ling Yunwu had no choice but to follow them and land in front of Ying Chao. Ying Chao smiled and asked, "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. What did you encounter underground?" "Reporting to High Master Ying." One of the bird cultivators revealed his human form and cupped his hands across his chest. This disciple heard this dwarf say that he encountered an incomparably hard layer of stone below ground and was unable to go any further. Moreover, as he was looking for a flaw, 2 Dao sect cultivators suddenly appeared and attacked him without saying a single word. "Good!" Ying Chao clapped his hands and said, "The hard layer of stone must be where the spirit stone vein is located." Dao sect cultivators also appeared. "Is there any need to say anything?" "Who?" While they were talking, Ying Chao shouted and looked towards the forest. With a wave of his arm, his figure flew up and shouted, "Quickly call out the other dwarves. There is a golden core cultivator in this spirit stone vein. We will talk after we retreat." "Oh? It really is that bastard." Ling Yunwu's face revealed a sinister expression. "Since that bastard is here, I will turn this terrifying phoenix into a dead chicken man." Immediately after, Ling Yunwu also flew up on his sword and went straight into the sky. He waited for the bird cultivators to fly over with the dwarves before flying away with Ying Chao. Naturally, not long after they flew away, the bird cultivators who flew extremely high returned. They circled above the clouds in the sky, constantly monitoring the movements of Jinquan Mountain. Xiaohua, who was regarded as a dead chicken man by Ling Yunwu, was incomparably free and unfettered at this time. Except for the day when he sneaked into the depths of the spirit stone vein, he was a little cautious and did not go again. For the next few days, he casually said a few words to Ming Mao and then left. He secretly escaped into the depths of the spirit stone vein and used the wishful staff to mine for jade essence. Damn it, this young master has never seen so many spirit stones. No, it's jade essence. Damn it, if every day, every moment, how good would it be to mine jade essence like this? Xiaohua's eyes were shining. The wishful staff in his hand was constantly waving, and every time it was waved, a large or small piece of jade essence would fall. It was immediately absorbed into his space. That jade essence was really a strange thing between heaven and earth. It was incomparably hard, and previously it was perfectly round. Xiaohua could only use the silver-gilded dragon sword to dig out a small piece. Later, he was able to follow the traces of digging and use the wishful staff. Moreover, with each piece of jade essence, Xiaohua had a very familiar feeling. It seems, this young master often did this kind of thing before? Is it possible that this young master is a low-level cultivator who mines spirit stones? Xiaohua scratched his head. Or is it a spirit stone mine worker? Yes, mining jade essence and reclaiming wasteland were so similar, how could Xiaohua not feel familiar? And if possible, after the war, this young master will find an opportunity to go to a spirit stone mine and see if I can mix in as a miner. Not only can I satisfy my cravings, but I can also earn some spirit stones. Unfortunately, just as Xiaohua was imagining his happy life in the future, 1,000 miles sound transmitting talisman quietly appeared in front of his eyes. Oh? What happened to Ming Mao? Which little bastard actually dared to provoke our Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple? And even hindered this young master's wealth? It would be strange if this young master didn't beat you until you were crippled. Xiaohua was angry. When he gave Ming Mao the sound transmitting talisman, he said that unless it was a last resort, she must not look for him. However, when Xiaohua flew back and saw Ming Mao standing there peacefully without any other cultivators beside her, he couldn't help but frown. Senior Sister Ming Mao, did someone disturb you? Where is he? Junior brother Xiao, are you that concerned about your senior sister? Ming Mao said with a smile. Did you immediately stop cultivating and fly over to protect senior sister as soon as you received the sound-transmitting talisman? Xiao Hua was speechless when he saw how narcissistic Ming Mao was, even saying that she had secretly gone out to cultivate. After thinking for a while, he said with a smile, "This little brother has a secret technique to familiarize himself with, but since senior sister Ming Mao has something to do, this little brother can't not come. Actually, if you really have a secret technique to cultivate, you can just tell Captain Chui. He will definitely cultivate with you and won't need to be on guard duty," Ming Mao said with a smile. "Tell him?" Xiao Hua curled his lips. "I'm lazy. Don't you know?" I know you're lazy." "Can I tell him?" Ming Mao felt very good about herself. "You can't let your face affect your cultivation, right?" "No need." Hearing Ming Mao speak so intimately with him, Xiao Hua's intuition told him that Fairy Hong Xia's fingernails and Shui Shui's teeth had appeared behind him. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Senior sister, why did you suddenly send me a message?" "Can I send a message if there's nothing?" Ming Mao asked back. "Shouldn't you be on guard duty with this concubine?" Senior sister is joking. Hurry up and say it. This little brother's secret technique is still lacking." Xiao Hua saw Ming Mao take a step forward and immediately retreated 2 steps back and said with a smile. Ming Mao pouted and said unhappily, "It's nothing much. It's just that Captain Chui's message talisman asked us to return." "Oh? It seems like they haven't finished patrolling yet." Xiao Hua looked around and said curiously, "Could it be that something happened?" "Who knows? The message talisman didn't say anything." Ming Mao also shook her head blankly. However, when they returned to the quiet room and heard Shui Hongshan's explanation, Xiao Hua was stunned. "What? They want to send a few female cultivators to escort a very important item back to Sky Patrol City? Are you kidding me? Not to mention that there are many female cultivators in Quanji Mountain. Why did they choose 3 female disciples from my Imperial Thunder sect? Furthermore, didn't they want to conceal the information about Quanji Mountain's Spirit Stone Mine? If we escort the item out now, wouldn't it increase the chances of being exposed? Why? You can't bear to let senior sister Ming Mao go out?" Dui Qiming saw that Xiao Hua was puzzled and asked so many questions in a row and chuckled. Xiao Hua was speechless. He waved his hand and said, "I don't have any opinion. I just feel that it's a little strange. It doesn't matter if it's strange or not." Shui Hongshan ignored Xiao Hua's strangeness and waved his hand. "This is a good thing for my Imperial Thunder sect." -8. Chapter 2335. Xiao Hua naturally understood that once the 3 female cultivators left the Quanjin Mountain, they would naturally escape from the Quanjin Mountain. Even if the sword cultivator discovered the Quanjin Mountain Spirit Stone Mine, they would not be in any danger. Actually, this place is very safe. Sword cultivators are unlikely to discover this place. Xiao Hua looked at Dui Qiming and said, "Of course, Sky Patrol City is even safer. However, this way, the journey will be troublesome. Senior sister still has to be careful." "Many thanks, junior brother Xiao." Dui Qiming nodded, while Dui Ling pouted and said unhappily, "Actually, this concubine feels that staying by Xiao Hua's side is the safest." "All right," Xiao Hua hurriedly asked. "Senior sister Dui, when are you leaving?" "Naturally, it's now." Dui Qiming smiled and said, "If it wasn't for us returning late from patrol duty, I heard from Hongshan that the disciples of Quanjin Mountain would have let us go. And then senior sister Dui should hurry." Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat as he had a bad feeling. He raised his eyes to look at Shui Hongshan. Although Shui Hongshan only glanced at him and then looked at Dui Qiming, there was also deep worry in his eyes. "Then, this concubine is leaving?" Dui Qiming looked at Shui Hongshan, and the worst thing was that her bright eyes were also looking at Xiao Hua as she whispered, "Then, this concubine is leaving too?" Dui Ling looked like she was about to cry as she said to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua, I'm leaving too. Damn it, it seems this has nothing to do with this young master. Xiao Hua was about to cry, but at the same time, he also knew that this was the same situation as Foul Mountain. Seeing that they were about to meet in battle, it was even worse than Foul Mountain. He might be able to escape, but it was hard to say whether the Imperial Thundersect's first team would be intact. He also could not hurt the two's hearts for no reason, so he could only wave his hand and said, You all should hurry back to Sky Patrol City and pass a message to Yanxi Prefecture's conference hall. Oh? What message? Dui Ling was immediately confused by Xiao Hua and asked curiously. When Xiao Hua saw this, he said in all seriousness, Tell them to quickly prepare storage pouches and fill them with spirit stones. I want to kill a lot of sword cultivators in this battle and use their heads to exchange for spirit stones. Dui Ling chuckled. He clenched his fist and punched Xiao Hua's shoulder. He rebuked. This concubine was so worried about your lives. Are you really that heartless? The other disciples of the first squad of the Imperial Thunder sect looked a bit uncomfortable. Xiao Hua was also helpless, he could neither dodge nor not dodge. Fortunately, when Dui Ling's fist landed, without waiting for him to speak, a Jinshan Quanjin Mountain disciple hurried over. Upon seeing the three of them, he was overjoyed and said, 3 martial uncles, please hurry over with this junior. Martial Uncle Lan and the rest are already waiting anxiously. This junior is here to urge them. Then, the disciple handed a jade slip to Cui Hongshan and said, Captain Cui, please return the previous jade slip to this junior. This jade slip has been rearranged. Yes. Cui Hongshan took the jade slip and returned the jade slip that Lan Xian had given him to the disciple. Then, he said, I'll send you off. Cui Hongshan was reluctant to part with Dui Qiming. Captain Cui, the disciple said awkwardly, you should know that this is a secret. It's best not to let the other disciples know. If you send them off, this Cui understands. Cui Hongshan nodded. He looked at Dui Qiming and said, Be careful on the road. This concubine understands. You must also be careful. Dui Qiming knew that the ones she should warn the most were Cui Hongshan and the others. But she couldn't say such discouraging words. She could only hint. Don't force yourself. Listen to the opinions of others. This concubine will wait for my husband at Sky Patrol City. The word husband awakened Cui Hongshan's tenderness and arrogance. He nodded and didn't say anything else. He watched as Dui Qiming, Ming Mao, and Dui Ling left with the Jinshan Quanjin Mountain disciple. After the 3 figures disappeared, Cui Hongshan waved his hand and said, Fellow junior apprentice brothers, it seems that the war is imminent. Our previous thoughts were too naive. Although this place is deep underground, it has already been discovered by the sword cultivators. Let's stop patrolling for now and focus on controlling the array formation. This will give us a chance to save our lives. Yes. Jin Minghui and the others nodded, but they didn't disperse. Cui Hongshan understood. He turned to look at Xiao Hua and said indifferently, What do you think? Nothing. Xiao Hua waved his hand. Just don't go too far from this Xiao. Then Xiao Hua turned and walked out. What are you going to do? Cui Hongshan couldn't help but ask. This Xiao is naturally going to be on duty. Xiao Hua didn't even turn his head. What nonsense! The sword cultivators were about to arrive. No matter who was in charge of Jinshan Quanjin Mountain, there probably wouldn't be a good opportunity to mine more jade essence in the future. Xiao Hua definitely needed to mine more jade essence. Thinking about how he just said that he didn't need to be on duty, Cui Hongshan was a bit angry. Captain Cui, let's hurry up and look at the array formation. Jin Minghui hurriedly said. Junior apprentice brother Zhao's cultivation is profound and isn't afraid of this. But we can't always rely on junior apprentice brother Zhao's protection. If we can use a bit more of the array formation's power, we will have a bit more chance of survival. Cui Hongshan clapped his hands and took out a jade slip. he and the other 6 disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect started to comprehend it again. Tu Hong didn't personally come out to arrange the transfer of the crystal coffin. However, his gaze was the same as Cui Hongshan's, very reluctant to part from the crystal coffin that had already been concealed. Moreover, his gaze also fell on Dui Qiming's face, who was smiling like a flower. A kind of distant memory seemed to have been awakened. Contrary to Cui Hongshan's expectations, and even more contrary to Tu Hong's expectations, another 3 days passed. Unexpectedly, it was very calm and there was no difference from before. If not for the dwarves coming to spy on them, Tu Hong would almost think that Quanjin Mountain was still unknown to the sword cultivators. And Xiao Hua was even more happy. In these few days, whenever he had time, he would go up and underground. The rare and unusual jade essence had long been pried away by him. Sometimes, when Xiao Hua returned to the quiet room, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. He took out the jade essence and looked at it left and right, unable to bear to put it down. On this day, Xiao Hua was still on patrol duty. He was mining for jade essence and selling dog meat under Quanjin Mountain's mineral veins. Suddenly, he heard a series of dong 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 tremors coming from the ground of Quanjin Mountain, almost causing him to raise his wishful staff to tilt. "Granny, the sword cultivators are finally here!" Xiao Hua hurriedly wanted to put away the wishful staff and escape back to the quiet room. However, when he saw that there was still a large piece of jade essence in front of him, he couldn't help but scratch his face and shouted, "Damn sword cultivators, you actually dared to block your grandpa's wealth! See how grandpa will deal with you!" Immediately, a big staff smashed on top of it, and a fist-sized jade essence fell down. Xiao Hua stretched out his hand and firmly caught it. Only then did he return to the mineral vein. -8. Chapter 2336. Dong dong. The sound became increasingly hurried, like footsteps, but also like a deliberate rhythm, smashing onto the ground and knocking on everyone's hearts. Without waiting for Xiao Hua to return to his quiet room, he heard a sharp whistle resounding throughout the entire Springgold Mountain mine. Groups after groups of Springgold Mountain disciples flew out from their respective resting places and flew towards different mountain caves. The thousands of Dao sect disciples who had come as reinforcements were also nervously flying back from their quiet rooms. Although the entire mine was in a mess, it was still in an orderly manner. Xiao Hua's appearance did not attract the attention of many people. Cui Hongshan and the rest naturally came out long ago. Seeing Xiao Hua return, they did not say much and waved their hands. "Follow this Cui." As he spoke, Cui Hongshan's figure flew up and flew straight towards the space where the Imperial Thunder Sect disciples entered Quanjin Mountain. When they arrived at the rather large space, the situation inside was already different. Not to mention that the atmosphere was very tense. Every Quanjin Mountain disciple's face was tense as they hurriedly commanded the incoming Dao sect disciples. Even the number of caves in the space had increased by a lot. Previously, when Xiao Hua and the rest entered, there were 4 to 5 connected tunnels in the space. Now, there were actually 40 to 50 tunnels, filling up the entire space. Every pitch-black cave had a Quanjin Mountain disciple guarding it. Hearing the disciple in the middle shouting out the name of the group that came as reinforcements, the disciple in charge would immediately raise his hand and invite the group of disciples to enter the tunnel through the cave above their heads. "And looks like Quanjin Mountain is still different from Chicken Crow Mountain." Seeing such a chaotic situation, Xiao Hua was rather confident in his heart as he thought to himself, "This way, the 7 disciples of my Imperial Thunder sect will be safe." In less than the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, it was the turn of the Imperial Thunder sect. Hearing that it was the first team of the Imperial Thunder sect, the innermost disciple immediately raised his hand to signal Cui Hongshan. Cui Hongshan understood and immediately activated his transcendence energy, and flew to the front of the pitch-black tunnel. The disciple on guard clapped his hands and took out 7 yellow talismans and handed them to Cui Hongshan. He said, "Team Leader Cui, these are the yellow talismans for the passage of our Mount Quanjin array. Please take them well." With these yellow talismans, you will be able to pass freely within the array for 3 hours. Of course, Captain Chui, please restrain your disciples and don't move around randomly. We have to be in sync and deal with sword cultivators together. I know. Chui Hongshun took the yellow talisman and nodded. Please. The disciple stepped aside and raised his hand. Please. Chui Hongshun also clasped his hands together and raised his head to take a look. His silhouette then flew up and rushed into the tunnel. After that, everyone followed suit, with Xiao Hua flying at the back. The tunnel was normal, but what was abnormal was that other than Chui Hongshun and the first team of the Imperial Thunder Sect, no other cultivators entered the tunnel. The cultivators of Jin Quan Mountain hurriedly set up their formation. Similarly, outside the mountain range of Jin Quan Mountain, a murderous aura soared to the heavens. A few li away from the Golden Spring Mountain, under the rare clear sky, within a radius of a few li, there was a spirit beast that was several zhang tall and 10 zhang long. It was unusually thick and sturdy, and it was approaching the Golden Spring Mountain in unison. The rhythm that was pounding on the ground was produced by these huge beasts. This was not including the trees. The most terrifying thing was that when these spirit beasts were pushed forward by a foot, the huge rocks, gentle slopes, and trees in front of them were all destroyed by them. When these huge beasts saw the huge rocks in front of them, they immediately spat out a kind of liquid from an oval, fist-sized hole on their faces and landed on the rocks. Following that, from another small hole under the same hole, an earthen yellow light was emitted. Following that, the huge rocks immediately turned soft and slightly collapsed. By the time the huge beast kicked a leg that was thicker than a pillar, the huge rocks had already turned into a pile of mud. Needless to say, the trees did not need any liquid. As long as the earthen yellow light swept past them, they would all collapse and turn into wood chips under the huge paws of the huge beasts. Behind the huge beasts, there were thousands of sword cultivators. All of them walked on their swords and their faces were extremely solemn. However, these sword cultivators who looked aloof and arrogant were just like their characters. They kept a distance from the huge beasts, as if they did not want to be associated with them. Looking at the sky above the huge beasts, there were hundreds of bird cultivators hovering in midair and gradually surrounding Jin Quan Mountain. A few miles away from the sword cultivators, in midair, Ling Yunwu was leading dozens of sword-nurturing disciples. He looked coldly at them. Beside him, there were also a few illusory sword cultivators and a few high-level beast cultivators. The bird cultivator Ing Chao was also among them. Sword friend Yuan Qing! Ling Yunwu finally could not hold it in and frowned. Your sky-scraping sword sect. With such preparations, aren't you giving the cultivators of Jin Quan Mountain a way out? If they escape from the south, then this Ling's matter. Cough, cough. That old man dressed in khaki sword robes was Yuan Qing of the sky-scraping sword sect. He coughed and looked at the few sword cultivators who were also illusory sword cultivators. He said, Sword friend Ling, this is not where your sword sect is defending. That's why you have such thoughts. If you were in my place, I'm afraid you wouldn't say that. Sigh, I understand. Ling Yunwu smiled bitterly. Sword Friend's arrangement is to make the cultivators have the intention to retreat and give up on the spiritual stone mine of Jin Quan Mountain. Then, we sword cultivators can take it down without shedding any blood. Yes, my sky-scraping sword sect and a few other sword sects indeed have such plans, Yuan Qing said without hiding anything. Furthermore, we have also considered that if the so-called terrifying phoenix is really at Jin Quan Mountain, he will definitely not escape. He might even take the initiative to fight. Don't forget, he is a golden core cultivator. If he escapes, he will lose all his face. Terrifying phoenix? Ling Yunwu's face showed a trace of displeasure. He said softly, Sword friend Yuan Qing, I have never mentioned it before, right? Don't pin this on me. Did I say it was you? Yuan Qing laughed. I don't care if he is a terrifying phoenix or a terrifying chicken. Even if he is a golden core cultivator, he will not be able to escape from my hands today. Then Yuan Qing turned his head and asked, Sword friendly, is there any problem with this blood calamity beast? A fat beast cultivator stepped forward and answered with a smile. Sword friend Yuan, don't worry. Although my mystic valley cannot be compared to the other beast cultivator sects in the sword domain, we are still good at rearing spiritual beasts. This blood calamity beast is good at harming spiritual trees and tormenting the soil. No other spiritual beast can compare to it. Hee hee. That's right. Ing Chao also laughed in a sharp voice. Even the old me is unfamiliar with this beast. If I had not discussed with the sword friends of the beast cultivators on how to dig out the Dao sect cultivators from underground a few days ago, the old me would not have known that this beast was actually so useful. This beast is meant for other purposes. It is normal that Senior Ing does not know about it, Li Min said respectfully. If not for the fact that these spiritual beasts are scattered all over the sword domain, making it troublesome for me to gather them, the attack would have started a few days ago. I hope it will not delay Senior's plan. Don't mention it. With this beast, we have saved a lot of trouble. I can't thank you enough, Ing Chao replied with a smile. The Valley Master of the Mystic Valley, Li Min, was a small figure in the sword domain. The Mystic Valley was a sect similar to the Spirit Husbandry sect in the country of Shi. In terms of cultivation, it was far inferior to the union of man and beast cultivators. Li Min had always lived in the sword domain with his tail between his legs, doing things that other beast cultivators were not willing to do. Usually, no swordsman thought highly of him. Now that he was suddenly put in an important position, he felt overwhelmed by favor. After we break through the Golden Spring Mountain today, I will make the decision to reward you with some of my beast cultivators' secret techniques. I will let you know the true profoundness of beast cultivators. Ing Chao looked at the fatty and was pleased with himself as he said casually, Yes, thank you, Senior Ing. The fatty almost bowed and kowtowed. He did not have the bearing of a valley master. Friend Ling Jianyu, why isn't your fellow sect members here yet? Seeing that the blood calamity beast had already reached the Golden Spring Mountain, Yuan Qing glanced at the talkative beast cultivator and asked, When the blood calamity beast crosses the mountain and enters the forest of the Golden Spring Mountain, the disciples of the Golden Spring Mountain will come out. When that time comes, the Golden Core cultivator will definitely come out. Do you want to accept the challenge? Of course I will accept the challenge. Ling Yunwu laughed coldly. I will definitely make up for my own mistakes. Up to you. Yuan Qing expressed that he did not feel any pressure. But Ling Yunwu once again looked anxiously in the direction of the Soaring Wind Sword sect. A few days had already passed. There was no reason for his fellow sect members to not be here. Moreover, if he was alone, he really did not have the confidence to capture that terrifying phoenix. Outside the Golden Spring mountain range, there was an orderly attack. But Tu Hong of the Golden Spring Mountain could no longer sit still. Facing the light screen in front of the triangular magic tool, he asked in disbelief. Old brother Lan, this beast, what is it? How come this old man has never heard of it before? This old man is also ignorant and inexperienced. Lan Xian ruefully smiled and then explained. There are many beast cultivators in the sword domain. It isn't strange for strange spirit beasts to appear. It's not strange that it's strange, but there are so many strange spirit beasts that I find strange, Tu Hong said with a bitter taste in his mouth. He did not send out the disciples of the Golden Spring Mountain or the Dao sect because he wanted to use the thick layer of earth on top of the Golden Spring Mountain's defensive array formation as a layer of defense. This would waste the strength of the sword cultivators and beast cultivators, and when they were tired, the cultivators would rush out and take advantage of the situation. But now, it seemed that Tu Hong's calculations were wrong. Moreover, facing so many spirit beasts, facing so many sword cultivators, after this battle, even if the Golden Spring Mountain won, it would still be a bloodbath. And this was only what Tu Hong saw through the magic tool. If he knew that there were still dozens of illusory swordsmen that had yet to arrive, he might not even have any thoughts of winning. -8. Chapter 2337. Punk punk. The orderly footsteps that shook the entire ground stopped. It was the thousands of blood calamity beasts that stopped and arrived at the foot of the Golden Spring Mountain. Not all of the blood calamity beasts had a beast cultivator on their backs. However, when a beast cultivator on a blood calamity beast patted the blood calamity beasts below him, the surrounding blood calamity beasts all stopped and pointed the black holes on their faces at the stone wall. Obviously, this stone wall was nothing in the eyes of the blood calamity beasts. However, the sword cultivators behind the blood calamity beasts did not give them a chance to show off. Seeing that the blood calamity beasts had stopped, 3 sword cultivators flew to the blood calamity beasts in a group. When the blood calamity beasts saw the sword cultivators approaching, they raised their heads and roared. The black holes on their faces also turned towards the sword cultivators. Hiss! The beast cultivators on the blood calamity beasts pursed their lips and let out a strange hiss. It was like the hiss of a poisonous snake in the grass. When they heard the hiss, all of the blood calamity beasts quietened down and lowered their heads. Rise! The 3 sword cultivators flew below the blood calamity beasts and stretched out their hands to support the blood calamity beasts. They roared in unison, and the huge blood calamity beasts slowly flew up towards the top of Jin Quan Mountain. Hee, these little fellows! They actually have to form a group of 3. They really lack cultivation. Yuan Qing watched from afar and commented with a smile. If it was me back then, I would be able to carry a blood calamity beast up the mountain. Of course, which of the swordsmen of Senior Yuan's generation did not train hard? They fought against soul cultivators in the snowy highlands? They are definitely not something that the younger generation can compare to. Fatty Li Min smiled apologetically and said, Of course, the swordsmen of your sect are also very good. It's all because our disciples are useless and cannot bring these spiritual beasts up the mountain. Humph, they actually want to use this layer of soil to block my sword cultivators' attack? The cultivators of the Dao sect really know how to dream. Ing Chao squinted his eyes and saw that his disciples were all in the air. He knew that the cultivators of Jin Quan Mountain were all hiding under the soil. Naturally, he could guess Tu Hang's plan. However, Ling Yunwu was a little distracted. Until now, the disciples of the Wind Sword sect had not arrived. Something must have happened. Eh? At that moment, the bird cultivators in the sky became a little disorganized. Ing Chao frowned when he realized that something was wrong. However, before he could frown, the bird cultivators quieted down again. In the direction of the Huan nation, a dozen small dots flew over from afar. Hee, young friend Ling, your senior brothers are here. Ing Chao glanced around and a divine light flashed in his eyes. He had already seen the black dot clearly. He turned his head and smiled at Ling Yunwu. All right. Although Ling Yunwu could not see it clearly, he still nodded and smiled. If that's the case, my sword cultivator will definitely be able to take down Quan Jin Shan. There are more than 10 illusory swordsmen. If we still can't take down Quan Jin Shan, our reputation as sword cultivators will be ruined by the Ling Feng sword sect. Yuan Qing said with a fake smile. Haha, don't worry, Senior Yuan. I'm only looking for that golden core cultivator. As for anything else, I won't ask. Ling Yunwu said with a smile. And Yuan Qing seemed to be nodding, but he did not seem to have heard it. His voice was extremely soft, as if he did not care at all. When the illusory swordsman landed on the ground, Ling Yunwu's expression changed drastically. It turned out that Yuan was also among the 10 illusory swordsmen. Husband! Yuan smiled and was about to speak when she heard Ling Yunwu scolding. I've already told you. You're only at the 2nd grade of the illusory sword realm. You won't be of any use here. Furthermore, the chestnut Little Moon Valley is more important. It's our Ling Feng sword sect's matter. Why didn't you listen to me and rushed over? Yuan was not angry and smiled apologetically. I know what's more important. Chestnut Little Moon Valley has our Ling Feng sword sect, Chant sword sect, and the other 3 sword sects. Those disciples are enough. Furthermore, sword friend Su Anhua of the Heavy Peak Sword Manor is not in the Sword Manor. Our Ling Feng sword sect only has 2 swordsmen whose flying swords can drill into the ground. I'm afraid these two swordsmen will not be able to force the golden core cultivator out of the spirit stone mine. That's why. I wanted to help my husband, that's why I rushed over. While Yuan was talking to Ling Yinwu, the other swordsman also greeted Yuan Qing and the other swordsman. Seeing this situation, Ling Yinwu sighed and said, "Sigh, that's the only way. Since you're here, how can I chase you away?" "Hee, husband, I'll be careful." "Don't worry." Yuan giggled and replied, "Let's go and take a look." Yuan Qing flicked his sleeves and said, "Although the Soaring Wind Sword Sect and the other sword friends are here to help, and this Golden Spring Mountain is definitely not a problem, we still have to be careful, and not let too many disciples die. And, Senior Yuan, you go ahead first." Ling Yunwu thought for a moment, and said, "Junior will discuss with my senior brothers how to kill our way into Jin Quan Mountain." "All right. All of you stay back for the time being. Be a hidden backup." Yuan Qing nodded and flew into the air. The other swordsmen and beast cultivators also flew up. At this moment, the Blood Calamity Beast had already landed on the forest of Jin Quan Mountain. Thousands of Blood Calamity Beasts once again lined up in a row and slowly pushed forward. In the blink of an eye, the lush green pines and cypresses were turned into wood shavings and scattered across the soil. If the Dao sect cultivators were not scared out of their wits by our huge attack, then their brains must have been damaged by their so-called magic arts. Yuan Qing's figure stopped in midair as he squinted his eyes and coldly said, "Even if the soil of Jin Quan Mountain is very thick and even very hard, under the huge palms of the Blood Calamity Beast, it will be destroyed sooner or later. If they don't come out to fight now, could it be that they are waiting until—" Unfortunately, before he could finish his sentence, a loud rumbling sound could be heard from the forest of Jin Quan Mountain. The entire mountain range shook and many Blood Calamity Beasts lost their balance and fell to the ground. The beast cultivators on their backs also fell to the ground. In an instant, the neat formation of the Blood Calamity Beasts became messy. Many Blood Calamity Beasts even fled in fear. If they were not stepping on the fallen Blood Calamity Beasts, they were stepping on the fallen beast cultivators. It was a complete mess. Fatty Li Min's face was filled with panic as he hurriedly smiled apologetically. "Senior Ing, this is the bad thing about the Blood Calamity Beasts. They are too cowardly and will flee at the slightest sign of danger. And, quickly go and pacify them." Ing Chao lightly nodded his head. "Even if the Dao sect cultivators come out, we will have swordsmen in the air to welcome them. Beast cultivators only need to destroy the soil layer." Yes, Junior will go right now." Li Min wiped the sweat off his face as he hurriedly flew into midair. With a clap of his hand, a fist-sized drum appeared. Then, he reached into his chest and took out a long white bone. Without hesitation, he hit the drum on the drum. -8. Chapter 2338. Boom! All the Blood Calamity Beasts that were running around in a panic were stunned. They stood there, not daring to move at all. Dong dong! Li Min knocked twice again. The Blood Calamity Beast began to slowly move to its original position. The Blood Calamity Beast and the Beast Cultivator disciples who were lying on the ground struggled for a while before they stood up. Dong dong dong! Li Min began to beat the drum rhythmically. The Blood Calamity Beasts began to move forward again. Looking at the forest again, there were dozens of places where the mana started to fluctuate. The surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth started to gather. Wang wang! Sounds could be heard from dozens of places. Following that, an earthen yellow light appeared. Dozens and hundreds of teams of Golden Spring Mountain disciples and cultivators from the three kingdoms flew out from the light. When the cultivators flew out, they did not stop. They immediately activated the weapons in their hands and smashed them at the Blood Calamity Beasts. These cultivators could not hold back anymore. They even crawled out from their turtle shells. When Yuan Qing saw this, he almost laughed out loud. He pointed his finger, and the flying sword under his feet shone with sword light. He had the urge to give it a try. The sword cultivators in the sky who had been on guard all this time naturally reacted to Yuan Qing's thoughts. When they saw the abnormality on the ground, they immediately activated their sword energy. Sword lights of different colors shot towards the ground like fireworks. Even though the sword cultivators' flying swords were fast, they were not as close as the cultivators to the blood calamity beasts. Before the thousands of flying swords could reach half of them, the Tao sect cultivators' weapons had already hit the blood calamity beasts. Roar! Seeing the many weapons flying towards them and tearing apart the dense spiritual chi of heaven and earth around the forest, the blood calamity beasts that were attacked by the weapons roared angrily. The black holes above their heads spat out a thin liquid as they tried their best to defend themselves. However, the cultivator's magic artifact easily dodged the liquid, which was nothing special, and quickly smashed into the blood calamity beast. The blood calamity beasts were huge, and it was not easy to dodge. However, when the weapons hit them, the blood calamity beasts' bodies swelled up as if they were inflated. Puff, puff, puff! A series of sounds could be heard. The Dharma artifact had struck the blood calamity beast. To everyone's surprise, the ferocious-looking blood calamity beast only had a frightening body. No matter how big or small the cultivator's magic treasures were, they all pierced through the blood calamity beast's skin and entered its body. Then, the Dharma artifact appeared from the other side of the blood calamity beast's body, dripping with blood. Roar! The injured blood calamity beast roared and its huge body slowly fell to the ground. Blood continuously flowed out from the bloody hole. Looking at the blood calamity beasts that were not attacked by the Dharma artifact, they panicked and scattered in all directions, trying to escape. Ah! Ing Chao, who had an extremely ugly expression on his face, came to a realization when he heard the roars that rose and fell throughout the entire mountain range. These roars were not angry roars, but the roars of fear and panic from the blood calamity beast. Li Min, why is this blood disaster beast so weak? Ing Chao could not help but look at Li Min, who was about to fly up into the sky. Fatty Li Min's face was already dripping with sweat and his expression was extremely ugly. He laughed bitterly. Eldering, this is how the blood calamity beast is. I have already told Elder Yuan about it before I came here. Sigh. Yuan Qing sighed and laughed bitterly. Of course I know about it. But when I saw how huge the blood calamity beast is, no matter what, it should have some defensive power. But I did not expect it to be so weak. If the blood calamity beast's defensive power was any stronger, I am afraid we would have already known about this spiritual beast's name. Another beast cultivator said thoughtfully. I will go and pacify the blood calamity beast. Li Min had already flown up and the small drum in his hand appeared again. Yuan Qing also said, I will go too. This blood calamity beast is the key to attacking Jishan Quan. We cannot lose it. I will lead the swordsmen to protect the blood calamity beast. The cultivators of Jishan Quan were stunned. They did not expect the blood calamity beast to be killed so easily. But before they could use their Dharma artifacts to attack the other blood calamity beasts, the flying swords of the sword cultivators had already flown above their heads. Kill! The cultivators hurriedly threw out their yellow talismans and activated their Dharma artifacts, wanting to block the flying swords of the sword cultivators. At this moment, the strength of different cultivators could be seen. Those who were prepared and had abundant Dharma artifacts and had good control over their Dharma artifacts, when the yellow talismans were used to block the sharpness of the flying swords, their Dharma artifacts were like venomous snakes, showing their viciousness. They swayed their Dharma artifacts, absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to attack the flying swords. Not to mention the lotus flowers, which were the Dharma artifacts of a Kunlun sect female cultivator, blocking the flying swords that streaked across the sky like lightning between the lotus leaves. Not to mention the green clouds in the morning, which gave birth to the vitality of the day and night, which were the Dharma artifacts of a Foundation Establishment middle stage cultivator from Chichiao sect, which wrapped around the flying swords that were like the scorching sun in the sky. Not to mention the jade snake, which was the Dharma artifacts of a Foundation Establishment early stage cultivator from Taiching sect, which bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it rushed into the air, swallowing the flying swords that were like pitch-black pellets but were condensed with extremely sharp sword intent. However, an ardent Fire Mountain disciple wearing a blood-red Taoist robe saw that he did not have time to activate his Dharma artifact. His eyebrows furrowed and he raised his hand. The blood-red Taoist robe flew away from his body and turned into a blood cloud above his head, blocking the 2 flying swords that were about to pierce his head. This was enough to make Yuan Qing, who was flying in the air, feel astonished. The attacks of sword cultivators had always been sharp and incisive. It was the pride of sword cultivators and also the reason why sword cultivators looked down on other cultivators. However, at this moment, the outstanding performance of the Dao sect cultivators made Yuan Qing feel astonished. However, in just a few breaths, waves of heart-wrenching screams rose and fell in the forest. Yuan Qing's divine sense swept over and the corners of his mouth unconsciously curled into a smile. Among the thousands of cultivators that suddenly appeared, only 20% of them made Yuan Qing look at them in a new light. After blocking the sharp flying swords of the sword cultivators, they immediately counterattacked, killing the sword cultivators at the same time as clouds of blood mist appeared. There were also cultivators in the surroundings who were barely able to block the flying swords of the sword cultivators and had to activate their Dharma artifacts in preparation for a counterattack. As for the remaining 40% of cultivators, they were in a disadvantageous position. Not to mention being flustered, even if they activated their Dharma chi to cast spells or activated their Dharma artifacts, they were like paper in front of the various flying swords of the sword cultivators. Most of the screams that rose and fell in the forest came from the mouths of these cultivators. Blossoms of blood were comparable to the sunset, dyeing the sky and the forest red. Lives were comparable to mayflies, only revealing themselves for a moment before falling into the abyss. -8. Chapter 2339. Dong dong dong. Fatty Li Min's small drum sounded again. Instead of saying that it was a secret skill that he used to pacify the blood calamity beast, it was more appropriate to say that he was pacifying the hundreds of sword cultivators and cultivators who had lost their lives during the battle. The blood calamity beast gradually calmed down, but its eyes were filled with excitement. The blood-red color that flashed across the entire forest was provoking the blood calamity beast's desire. Rumble. Pung pung pung. All kinds of sounds and brilliance flashed on the battlefield. Corpses and fresh blood became the main melody in the eyes of the cultivators and swordsmen. Wang, seeing that the swordsmen had gained the upper hand and the beast cultivators swooped down from the sky, the forest emitted an earthy yellow light, and waves of spiritual power appeared. The cultivators who had been fighting hard finally relaxed. They formed a spell with their hands, and with a flash of light, all of them disappeared into the ground. Of course, at this moment, there were still dozens of cultivators who could not dodge the sword cultivators' flying swords, and their corpses were left in the forest. Roar! The blood calamity beasts that had lost a portion of their lives were suddenly excited. They leaped up and rushed toward the corpses that were scattered all over the ground. Blood-red tentacles extended out from the black holes on their faces. These tentacles had jagged protrusions that were about an inch long. These tentacles wrapped around the bloody corpses, and with a slight twitch, the blood calamity beasts tore off large chunks of flesh from the corpses, and with a slight flip, they were thrown into the black holes of the blood calamity beasts. Quick! Stop it! Yuan Qing was furious. Among the corpses, most of them were cultivators, but there were also many sword cultivators. He could not allow the blood calamity beasts to feast on the corpses. Yes, yes! Fatty Li Min wiped off the sweat on his forehead again, and his hands quickly hit the small drum. The sonorous sound of the drum resounded across the battlefield. When the blood calamity beasts heard the sound of the drum, they were first agitated, but then they gradually calmed down. However, the blood that filled the battlefield spread in the mouths and minds of the blood calamity beasts. Gradually, the blood overwhelmed the sound of the drum, and the blood calamity beasts became agitated again, and rushed toward the corpses. Damn it! Yuan Qing was furious. He waved his hand and a green sword gleam flashed. 2 blood disaster beasts that were devouring the sword cultivator's corpse fell to the ground. However, there were more blood calamity beasts than corpses to begin with. As soon as the 2 blood calamity beasts fell to the ground, the other 3 blood calamity beasts rushed over and continued to devour the corpses. Yuan Qing waved his hand again, and the 3 blood calamity beasts fell to the ground again. The 5 blood calamity beast corpses blocked the 2 sword cultivator corpses, and no other blood calamity beast charged forward. However, there were more than 5 blood calamity beasts on the battlefield. How could the corpse of a sword cultivator be the only one on the ground? Moreover, the swordsmen's corpses were piled up together with the cultivators' corpses, and it was hard to tell them apart. The blood calamity beasts tore the corpses apart, and the swordsmen's eyes were filled with blood. Although they were used to seeing blood, many of them were still pale and could not help but vomit. There were also dozens of swordsmen who saw Yuan Qing attacking, and they waved their flying swords to kill the blood calamity beasts. However, after killing a few blood calamity beasts, they realized that it was futile. Just as they were about to think of another way, Fatty Li Min's drumming stopped. He said faintly, "Fellow swordsmen, these blood calamity beasts feed on flesh and blood. Now that they are surrounded by flesh and blood, they are unable to control themselves. I think, if we swordsmen were to encounter such a situation, we might not be able to control ourselves. We still need these blood calamity beasts to contribute to this battle. If we kill them now, the soil layer on Mount Quanjin will not be removed. In my opinion, why don't, after the battle, we kill all these blood calamity beasts to punish them for offending the swordsmen's corpses, and to appease the souls of the swordsmen in heaven?" Li Min's voice was filled with sorrow, and it echoed in the air. When it mixed with the sound of the blood calamity beasts eating the corpses, it made one's heart ache. "Fellow swordsmen, use your fastest flying techniques to bring the fallen swordsmen away from the ground, and snatch their corpses from the mouths of the blood calamity beasts." Yuan Qing and Ing Chao flew up at the same time, and said loudly, "They used their lives to protect the honor of swordsmen. We cannot let their corpses become food for the spiritual beasts. But don't hurt the blood calamity beasts. With them, we will have fewer casualties, and we will be able to kill the cultivators of the Tao sect." Yes, many sword cultivators had tears in their eyes. They responded at the same time, and their figures shot into the forest like lightning. As for the bird cultivators flying in the air, they let out sharp cries as they swooped down. Within Mount Quanjin, Tu Hong narrowed his eyes, coldly staring at the curtain of light. He looked at the bloodstains on the battlefield, and at the corpses in the mouths of the blood calamity beasts. "No wonder, we didn't know about these blood calamity beasts," Lan Xian muttered to herself, her face cloudy and uncertain. All of a sudden, Tu Hong, who was sitting upright on the chair, moved. His hands formed a seal, and a ray of light hit the Mitsubishi's magic tool. Immediately, a fiery red ray of light shot out from the magic tool and rushed to all sides of the cave, disappearing without a trace. "Great General, do we still want to attack?" Lan Xian nearly cried out in alarm. "Many of the disciples haven't rested yet, and I fear that they haven't even taken pills yet. How can we attack now? I am inferior to you when it comes to managing the internal affairs of Mount Quanjin. But when it comes to fighting, you are inferior to me." Tu Hong's eyes were cold as he looked at the curtain of light. He faintly replied, "At this time, the blood calamity beasts are eating. Presumably it won't be long before they become 100 times more energetic. My Mount Quanjin will soon be broken through by them. Moreover, the sword cultivators are saving their corpses. This is the best time to sneak attack them. My Mount Quanjin has fewer cultivators than the sword cultivators that came to attack, so we are at a disadvantage. If we don't attack now, when will we? Also, the blood calamity beasts are tearing apart the corpses of my Tao sect cultivators. When my Tao sect disciples see this, how can they not kill these spirit beasts?" Tu Hong's eyes twitched as he spoke. Yes, Lan Xian's face was filled with extreme helplessness. But she couldn't help but admit that what Tu Hong said was indeed reasonable. Sure enough, even the sword cultivators and bird cultivators would never have thought that the cultivators that had just escaped would suddenly appear. They were caught off guard, and in several breaths of time, even more sword cultivators fell. At the same time, another 20% of the blood calamity beasts fell into pools of their own blood. Kill! The Dao sect cultivators saw their fellow Taoists that had been full of vigor and vitality a moment ago, but now they had all died miserable deaths and had become food for the spirit beasts. Their eyes were already red with envy. Even if they were to be injured, they would still kill these evil beasts that disturbed the peace of the dead. -8. Chapter 2340. Seeing that the formation of the sword cultivators was a little messy, Yuan Qing transmitted his voice loudly. Disciples who are pregnant with swords snatch the corpses of the swordsmen. Disciples who are drawing their swords kill the cultivators. This sentence woke up the swarm of sword cultivators. In less than 10 minutes, the situation on the battlefield was reversed, and the sword cultivators gained the upper hand again. Fortunately, at this moment, the cultivator's formation lit up again and brought the cultivator, whose magic power had been depleted, into the formation. Seeing that the cultivators were defeated, the sword cultivators moved again. Half of the sword cultivators stood on their flying swords and stared at the ground with bright eyes, guarding against the sneak attack of the cultivators. The other half of the sword cultivators rushed into the group of blood calamity beasts and snatched the corpses of the fallen swordsmen. Sigh! Ing Chao stood straight in the air and his face was expressionless. However, there was a hint of sympathy in his eyes as he sighed. I just came into contact with the cultivators and this battle has turned out like this. This is really beyond my expectations. The battle is not something that we can compare to. Yuan Qing looked at the pool of blood on the ground and said coldly, even if we were to enter with the cultivation of the illusory sword, there is a possibility of death. However, this situation has indeed exceeded our expectations, but what is the result? The warriors of the sword region far surpass the cultivators of the Dao sect. If we can't kill the cultivators, how can we face our elders? Ing Chao laughed coldly. When we break through the defense of Mount Quanjin, I will bathe Mount Quanjin in blood. In the next 4 hours, the cultivators of the Dao sect did not come and the blood calamity beasts were full. Under the command of the beast cultivators of the Maze Valley, they raised their huge palms and continued to break through the forest of Mount Quanjin. The corpses of the cultivators that were not swallowed turned into blood under their feet and seeped into the ground. All the sword cultivators were flying in the air, and their eyes were filled with anger and hatred. They looked at the blood calamity beasts, and the ground of Mount Quanjin. The sword radiance around them was breathing and expanding and contracting from time to time. They were deliberately preparing to welcome the cultivators' attack. The corpses of cultivators and swordsmen were piled up under the blood calamity beasts' feet. How could they tell the difference when they stepped on the blood at the same time? The tentacles in the blood calamity beast's black hole were strange as well. Just one of them was enough to tear the flesh of several corpses apart. Even though the swordsman was fast and the bird cultivator's eyesight was sharp, they still couldn't tell. Therefore, only the disciples who were pregnant with swords managed to snatch dozens of intact corpses of the swordsmen. The rest had all turned into meat paste and blended together with the corpses of the cultivators and the black soil. Needless to say, even if the blood disaster beast completely destroyed the forest, this place would definitely become a thriving place in the next year or the year after that. Perhaps, the cycle of prosperity and decline, the cycle of life and death, was between destruction and rebirth? As the blood calamity beasts pushed forward inch by inch, the color of the forest gradually faded away, revealing the snow-covered ground. However, the passageway that Xiaohua and the rest used to enter the underground was not revealed, as it had already been destroyed by the disciples of Jinshan Mountain. Great General, what should we do now? Lan Xian frowned as she watched the blood disaster beasts destroy the forest. This sword cultivator actually destroyed the entire forest of Jinshan Mountain. It seems that they have the intention of completely taking over Jinshan Mountain. Tu Hong was also in an extremely difficult position. It wasn't that he didn't have a backup plan, but this was just the beginning. This blood disaster beast didn't have any attack power, and yet he had to take out such a powerful backup plan. If the sword cultivator made another move, wouldn't he have no strength to fight back? Tu Hong's eyebrows tightened, as if they were twisted together. He waved his hand and sneered. The sword cultivator has the blood disaster beast, but my Dao sect has the mortal body of a cultivator. Now that things have reached this point, there is no need to speak of mercy or tolerance. Even if you are not a disciple of my Jinshan Mountain, you should still have the awareness that you will perish here. Lan Xian nodded. Just as she was about to speak, there was some movement outside the cave. Who is it? Tu Hong's face was as cold as ice. He waved his hand and a brilliant light shot towards the cave entrance. Immediately, several cultivators rushed into the cave, accompanied by a Jinshan Mountain disciple. Great General! The disciple's face was filled with panic. He nervously said, This subordinate was unable to. It was these Rocky Border Sect fellow Taoists that forced this subordinate. Humph! These Rocky Border Sect disciples don't know the rules of my Jinshan Mountain, but you do. Tu Hong coldly said. What is the crime of trespassing into the commander's tent during a great battle? The disciple's face was ashen. But at this time, he stiffened his neck and replied. Reporting to the great general, this subordinate understands. During a great battle, trespassing into the commander's tent is punishable by death. As long as you know. Tu Hong nodded. Then you should know what to do. Yes, this subordinate understands. The disciple bowed and turned to leave. Senior 2. A middle foundation establishment cultivator leading the group coldly said. We came to reinforce Jinshan Mountain, but we didn't come to watch Senior 2 and his subordinates put on a show. What business do you have? Tu Hong lightly asked, not bothering to explain. We Dao sect disciples came to Jinshan Mountain as reinforcements because we were prepared to put our lives on the line. However, if we were to die in Jinshan Mountain, our corpses must be left behind and brought back to Rocky Border Sect. But what about Senior 2's actions? Other sword cultivators still know to send disciples to retrieve the corpses of their fallen disciples. But the corpses of our Dao sect cultivators were left on the ground for no reason. Not only did they not retrieve them, they were trampled on by the giant beast and were even eaten alive by the giant beast. Senior 2, such a method, isn't it chilling the hearts of our reinforcements? Are you waiting for me to finish? Tu Hong nodded and asked. Also, the yellow talismans on our bodies. Although we can enter and exit the array, if the array is not opened, we can't enter the array at all. How is this different from not having any yellow talismans? If the array is not opened, wouldn't we have to fight the sword cultivators to the death? Is there anything else? Tu Hong still nodded. At this moment, a deep voice sounded. Reporting to the great general, the disciples who violated the military order have been beheaded. Bring it in. Tu Hong's eyebrows did not raise as he casually replied. Yes. Following the sound of that voice, a wave of firm footsteps came in. A robust Qi refining cultivator walked in with a vermilion-painted board in his hand. On the board was a large head. It was none other than the Foundation establishment cultivator who went out to receive punishment. Seeing that the blood on the board had yet to dry and the two eyes on the head had yet to close, the Rocky Border Sect disciples could not help but exclaim. They did not expect that Tu Hong was actually serious. -8. Chapter 2341. Brother! Tu Hong stepped forward and bowed deeply. He stretched out his right hand and slowly placed it on his head. This too is untalented and can only bring you to this point. From now on, you have to walk your own path. Following Tu Hong's right hand, his head was filled with hatred. He hated that he couldn't die on the battlefield and closed his eyes. Senior 2, there's no need to do this. The leader of the Rock Border Sect disciples said with regret. This fellow Taoist was forced to come here by us. Humph! Tu Hong suddenly turned his head and swept his gaze across the disciples. Even the middle-stage Foundation establishment disciples were startled. A layer of goosebumps appeared on their bodies and they almost took half a step back. Their true essence flowed rapidly as if guarding against Tu Hong. but Tu Hong didn't make any move. He waved his hand and said, "Take this brother's head and bury it with his corpse. Then tell those who want to go out and snatch their brother's corpse that it's a small matter to snatch the corpse, but it's a big matter to protect Jin Quan Mountain. No matter where our brother's corpse is, our heart is to bury them in their graves." Yes, this subordinate understands. The Chi refinement disciple's tiger-like eyes glistened with tears. Also, Tu Hong raised his head and said, "If this too falls here, you all must not collect my corpse. Let this too's flesh and blood coexist with this Jin Quan Mountain." Yes. The Chi refinement disciple puffed out his chest and said loudly. He turned around and left. After watching the Chi refining disciple leave, the disciples of the Rocky Border sect looked at each other in dismay. Although they had thought of many countermeasures and hypothesized many of Tu Hong's actions, but this move was something they could never have imagined even in their wildest dreams. Immediately, the leader of the Rock Border sect disciples bowed and said, "Senior Tu, this junior was wrong. This is really a big mistake, please punish us." As soon as he said this, the other disciples hurriedly bowed and shouted, "This junior was wrong, please punish us." Hee. Tu Hong's face that was always calm like water had a trace of a smile. He walked steadily to the front of the disciples and reached out to help them up. He said, "You are wrong, but you are also not wrong. The fault lies in the fact that sword cultivators invaded my country of Shi and stepped into the territory of my Sky Patrol city." Yes. Seeing that Tu Hong had no intention of killing them, the disciples of the Rock Border sect felt relieved and smiled apologetically. "Although all of you are in the wrong, but all of you are not my Spring Jin Mountain's disciples, and do not understand my Spring Jin Mountain's military rules. This is also my fault." The smile on Tu Hong's face gradually disappeared, and he continued, "Those who don't know can't be blamed, even in my Quan Jin Mountain. Now that we're in the middle of a war, this old man won't say anything unnecessary. Go and guard the formation well. Act according to this old man's orders. If anyone slacks off on the military rules, this old man won't show any mercy." Yes, this junior understands. The hearts of several Rock Border sect disciples trembled as they bowed in salute. "Someone come, bring back the fellow Taoists who came as reinforcements," Lon Xin hurriedly shouted out. After the patrolling disciples took away the several Rocky Edge faction disciples, Lon Xin looked at Tu Hong and then stared at the light screen. She said in a soft voice, "Like this, the cultivators of the various sects should be able to calm down. But how many illusory swordsmen have come? If there are too many, then my Spring Jin Mountain's array formation won't be able to block them." It was as if what happened just now was nothing more than an ordinary scene. The lives of the Spring Jin Mountain disciples were like duckweeds floating in the wild. According to this old man's estimate, there shouldn't be more than 5 illusory swordsmen. According to the intelligence, there shouldn't be more than 4 sword sects attacking Spring Jin Mountain, and each sword sect should have an illusory sword. They shouldn't have come out in full force. Tu Hong didn't care about this. He sneered. In fact, this old man would rather have more sword cultivators come. The more illusory swordsmen there are, this old man will become more famous. Yes. Although Lon Xin didn't understand Tu Hong's plan, she still replied. What this old man is worried about is that Yu Ming and the others have been gone for a long time and there still hasn't been any news from them. I don't know if they've reached Sky Patrol City yet. As he spoke of Yu Ming, Tu Hong's face revealed a trace of worry. The sword cultivator's attention is all on the Spirit Stone mine. They won't be distracted by any random cultivators. Lord General, please rest assured. What could Lon Xin say? She could only comfort Tu Hong. What about the other disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect? Lon Xin seemed to think of something. She asked with some doubt. I don't think I've seen them go out to meet the enemy? Haha. Tu Hong didn't answer. He pointed at the light screen and said, The giant beasts are tired. Should we attack them again? What the Lord General says is right. This is the best time to kill these giant beasts. Lan Xian tactfully didn't mention it again. It was as if the disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect had already died. The disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect naturally wouldn't die. They followed the instructions in the jade slip and entered the tunnel. Then, they flew along the spacious tunnel. However, after flying for a moment, the tunnel turned downwards and they flew along several forks. Luckily, the jade slip was marked so Cui Hongshan wasn't afraid of getting lost. He picked one of the paths and continued down. After flying like this for the time it took to eat a meal, they arrived at a large abandoned cave. Oh! Xiaohua's eyes swept over the cave, a bit surprised in his heart. It was obvious that there were many exits in the cave. Not only that, but the inside of the cave was filled with dim bright flower stones. In the shadows where the light couldn't reach, there were several small thumb-sized spirit stones scattered about. This was definitely a spirit stone mine that had been excavated a long time ago. It's here! Cui Hongshan looked at the jade slip and waved his hand. Let's sit down according to the formation we comprehended before. I will wait for Senior 2's instructions. We will stimulate our magic power and support the array formation with the disciples of Gold Spring Mountain and the other disciples. It's here? Xiaohua almost wanted to hold his stomach and laugh out loud. This was already the depths of the spirit stone mine. The surrounding soil layer was extremely dense and his divine sense couldn't reach too far. However, although he couldn't see too far, Xiaohua would be the first to not believe that this was just a corner of the array formation and that the disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect could transmit their magic power to the ground from here. And it's here! Cui Hongshan saw the disdain on Xiaohua's face and secretly frowned. Then, he said arrogantly, "This is just a corner of Gold Spring Mountain's defensive array formation. Naturally, it's hidden. If you don't understand, then don't say any more. We will follow Senior 2's instructions, and just move." Xiaohua saw that everyone had sat down. It was actually an ordinary array formation planning method. He blinked his eyes and flew up again. "Xiaohua, what are you doing?" Cui Hongshan immediately shouted. "Xiaohua will look around." Xiaohua didn't stop and immediately flew towards one of the passages above the cave. -8. Chapter 2342. Cui Hongshan clenched his teeth and said in a low voice, "Xiaohua, I know that your cultivation is high and your strength is comparable to early gold core. However, this is a battle with a sword cultivator. Even a true gold core cultivator like Senior 2 Hong wouldn't dare to be careless. They all have to focus on the arrangement of troops, focus on the group battle, focus on the array to defend against the enemy. You have to look at the big picture." Cui Hongshan's voice became softer and softer. Because Xiaohua had already flown away, who could he say it to? Sigh. Cui Hongshan felt somewhat powerless. Seeing that the other 5 Imperial Thunder Sect disciples were all sitting obediently with their eyes closed, he also sighed and sat down. Cui Hongshan wanted to calm his heart and regulate his breathing. However, no matter what, he couldn't enter the ethereal state. Helpless, he could only open his eyes. However, when he opened his eyes, he almost jumped up in fright. He saw Xiaohua's slender face swaying in front of his eyes. When did you return?" Cui Hongshan asked in shock. "I came a long time ago," Xiaohua said weakly. "I have already looked around. Don't talk about other sect disciples, there isn't even an ant. What do you think we should do? What should we do?" "Naturally, we should wait," Cui Hongshan said without hesitation. "But this place is under the Spirit Stone Mine. It has nothing to do with the defensive array of Golden Spring Mountain," Xiaohua said angrily. "Look at the jade scroll yourself. Did you make a mistake?" "This?" Cui Hongshan took out the jade scroll doubtfully. He looked at it again and then handed it to Xiaohua. "I didn't make a mistake. Why don't you look at it yourself?" "I'm not looking." Xiaohua turned his head and said, "Senior brother Minghui, look again." Cui Hongshan ignored Xiaohua and handed the jade scroll to Jin Minghui. When Jin Minghui looked carefully, Cui Hongshan asked with interest. Xiaohua, how do you know that this is under the Spirit Stone mine? I just know. What about it? Xiaohua said disdainfully. Have you been here before? Cui Hongshan narrowed his eyes and looked at Xiaohua. Oh? What? Did Ming Mao tell you about this? Xiaohua asked. Ming Mao never told me. But this Cui can guess. Cui Hongshan secretly despised in his heart. A rogue cultivator, as expected of a rogue cultivator. You don't have to care whether this Xiao came here or not. You. Think about it. Why did Tu Hong suddenly want to transfer 3 female disciples of my Imperial Thunder sect away from Golden Spring Mountain? Furthermore, he placed us here? What are his intentions? Xiaohua asked. Senior Tu Hong is a Golden Core cultivator, and he is in charge of Golden Spring Mountain. He is a dignified and magnanimous person. Yes, it can even be said that he has a good command over his army. He is a role model for us cultivators to emulate. Cui Hongshan held Tu Hong in high esteem and said with a smile, What could he possibly covet about the disciples of my Imperial Thunder sect? If there's anything, it's that he's taking pity on the juniors and transferring Qi Ming and the others back to Sky Patrol City. He's taking care of their lives and placing us under the Spirit Stone vein to prevent us from fighting against sword cultivators. This? Xiaohua was also speechless. What Cui Hongshan said was indeed reasonable. He couldn't say anything to refute it. However, Xiaohua didn't believe that Senior Tu Hong, whom he had never met before, would be so kind. Fellow Taoist Cui, is this Senior Tu your relative? Xiaohua suddenly realized. Nonsense! Cui Hongshan said coldly. This is the first time I've seen him at Golden Spring Mountain. I've never seen him before. Furthermore, don't make any dirty guesses. Senior Tu Hong's character is noble and pure. It's not something you can measure. Xiaohua looked at Cui Hongshan and almost thought that he was Tu Hong's illegitimate son. Junior brother Xiao. At this moment, Jin Minghui said, Captain Cui is right. We should be waiting for orders here. All right. Xiaohua stretched and threw a message talisman. Since you believe so much, then you can wait here. If you have any orders, fellow Taoist Cui can call me back at any time. After saying that, Xiaohua's figure swayed and flew towards the cave entrance. What are you going to do? Cui Hongshan said anxiously as he took the message talisman. I'm sleepy. I'm going to have a wet dream. Xiaohua's voice came from the cave entrance. This bastard. Seeing Xiaohua leave, Cui Hongshan was furious, but he also felt like he had lost something to rely on. He could only pinch the message talisman, hoping that Xiaohua wouldn't fool him. This is clearly below the jade essence. If I hadn't passed by here before, how would I know? Xiaohua left the cave and flew for a while. Looking at the familiar tunnel, he made a hand seal and entered the stone wall, heading towards the jade essence again. Time was tight and the mission was difficult. Xiaohua had to take advantage of the fact that the sword cultivators hadn't reached here and excavate as many jade essences as possible. He definitely couldn't leave any extra jade essences for the sword cultivators. This was Xiaohua's only thought in this dangerous situation. Xiaohua was so selfless, so considerate of the Dao sect's future. The day and night passed quickly. Everyone was working hard, whether it was the sword cultivators who were on guard in the air, the Dao sect cultivators who risked their lives to kill the blood calamity beasts, or even Xiaohua who was excavating selflessly. Naturally, everyone's harvest was bountiful. Less than 10% of the blood calamity beasts were left, and they were far less imposing than before. Similarly, less than 30% of the Golden Spring Mountain forest had been destroyed by the blood calamity beasts, and a piece of flat soil was revealed from the forest. The sword cultivators understood at a glance that this place had been tampered with by the Dao sect. However, the soil was drenched in blood and flesh, and a bloody stench permeated the mountain range. Amidst this bloody stench, there was a strange sense of sorrow. Enough! Yuan Qing waved his hand and said to Li Min with satisfaction. Take away all the blood calamity beasts in your Confusion Valley. They are the foundation of your Confusion Valley. If they are all consumed by us, what will happen to your Confusion Valley in the future? However, Li Min shook his head and said sincerely, Senior Yuan, I have already said that these blood calamity beasts have eaten the flesh of our warriors. They cannot be allowed to exist in this world. If Senior Yuan feels that these blood calamity beasts are no longer of any use, I will instruct my disciples to kill all these blood calamity beasts. Leave none alive! Haha, Valley Masterly! Ing Chao laughed. The blood calamity beasts are just stupid beasts without intelligence. How can they resist their natural appetite? Just now, your words have already made your intentions clear. We from the Sword region will definitely not blame these blood calamity beasts and your Confusion Valley. Don't worry. Yes, that's right. Yuan Qing nodded. These blood calamity beasts are also one of the great contributors in this battle. We do not have any rewards, so those can be considered as offsetting. Yes, I understand. Li Min nodded. Do we need to destroy the remaining 30% of the forest? Yes, that's enough. Yuan Qing nodded. Take away the blood calamity beasts. I have other methods. Yes. When Li Min heard that, he flew up and raised the small drum in his hand once again. Then, his left and right hands hit the drum. Instantly, a sonorous and powerful drum sound that was filled with sorrow, pity, reluctance, and even determination resounded through the entire Jin Quan mountain. It was as if he was paying tribute to the souls of the swordsmen who had passed away earlier, so that they could continue on their journey. Oh, Ing Chao's heart sank when he heard that. He looked at Li Min in confusion. He saw that Li Min was hitting the drum with a pale face and tears in his eyes. Ing Chao immediately understood and looked at Yuan Qing. As expected, Yuan Qing was also enlightened. The two of them looked at each other, and their eyes were filled with respect. They looked at the forest in front of Quanjin Mountain that had yet to be destroyed. Hundreds of blood calamity beasts sat down with the drum sound and bowed respectfully on the ground. Of the 10 blood calamity beasts that had been guarding the blood calamity beasts, there weren't many left. They leapt up from the backs of the blood calamity beasts and flew towards different blood calamity beasts. Every time they landed on a blood calamity beast, they would reach out and throw a fist-sized pill into its mouth. As each pill fell into the mouth of a blood calamity beast, that blood calamity beast would emit a low hiss and then lie down, motionless. Hiss. All of the swordsmen that were standing guard in the air also understood the actions of the Lost Valley. They couldn't help but feel a sense of respect in their hearts, and all of their previous thoughts vanished into thin air. Oh! Tu Hong's eyes also saw the situation on the light screen. His eyes flashed with a smile. He pointed a finger and said, It seems that the master of these blood calamity beasts is quite tactful. If he doesn't act decisively now, then after this battle, I fear that thousands of swordsmen will come knocking on his door. If he acts decisively today, there will be some losses, but he won't have any future burdens. He will also gain the respect of others. Yes, what the general says is true. Lan Xian nodded, but she was still puzzled. There's still 30% of the forest that hasn't been destroyed. Also, if my Golden Spring Mountains array formation isn't activated, then there should be several miles of earth covering it. Sword cultivators. There shouldn't be too many of them that choose to escape into the earth, right? Let's wait and see. Tu Hong waved his hand and looked back at the light screen. The sword cultivators didn't make Tu Hong wait for long. Yuan Qing stood in the air and turned to a tall old man. He smiled and said, Old brother John, the rest is up to you. With Valley Master Li Min laying the groundwork, it will be much easier for my Wild Beast Villa. This old man was War Sword of Wild Beast Villa. I wouldn't dare. Li Min had already put away his small drum. He respectfully replied, This junior has long admired Senior War Sword of Wild Beast Villa. I will wait and see. Good. War Sword clapped his hands. Your Lost Valley's blood calamity beasts are indeed unexpected, but how can my Wild Beast Villa allow you to monopolize the limelight? Come, take a look at the methods of my wild beast villa." As he spoke, the war sword general waved his hand. Hundreds of wild beast villa disciples, who were dressed in black and had their faces covered, who had been standing in the distance, flew up and flew towards the soil that the blood calamity beast had destroyed. -8. Chapter 23:43. Once the hundreds of disciples had lined up, he reached into his bosom and took out a flat object which he placed in his mouth. Then, he took out a black bag from his waist. When he opened the bag, a bunch of black objects flew out from the bag. When the crowd looked carefully, they saw that they were flying objects the size of a fist. The flying object looked like a gourd. It had a small head the size of a pinky finger, and a round body the size of a fist. On both sides of the body, there were 2 1-inch long transparent wings. One wang. As the flying object flew out, the buzzing sound got louder and louder. Gradually, the pitch-black flying object had covered the entire sky above Jinquan Mountain. Spirit swallowing bugs? Li Min was shocked. How is this possible? Hee, of course it's impossible. Zhang Jian laughed. If our crazy beast mountain villa had so many spirit-swallowing bugs, would we need to sacrifice so many swordsmen? Yes, it's my fault. Li Min smiled apologetically. It seems that there are some differences between them and the spirit-swallowing bugs. It's more than just some differences. There's a huge difference. Zhang Jian laughed, and did not explain further. He waved his hand and said, Boy, release the earth-swallowing bugs and let them have some fun. Yes, the disciples of the crazy beast mountain villa puffed up their cheeks, but no sound was heard. The so-called earth-swallowing bugs split into different groups and pounced on the ground, covering the soil densely. Earth-swallowing bugs? Li Min understood. Hee, actually it's nothing. The battle sword looked at Ing Chao and said with a smile, Thousands of years ago, my wild beast mountain villa obtained a secret method. I wanted to cultivate spirit-swallowing bugs, but I didn't manage to cultivate the spirit-swallowing bugs. Instead, I cultivated some useless things that can eat soil. We call them earth-swallowing bugs. These things are really useless. After all, they are the hard work of our crazy beast mountain villa for generations. We can't bear to destroy them. Previously, when we heard Senior Yuan mention that the spiritual stone mine in Jinquan Mountain was hidden underground, our villa master thought of this thing. Ha! Everything has its nemesis. Ing Chao laughed, and said, Exactly. Everything in the world is bound to be restrained by something. Yuan Qing also nodded. Then, as if he had thought of something, he said in a low voice, Senior Ing, the head of the Xunyan sect in the country of Xi is Fairy Ingshua. Her name is the same as yours. Are you her natural nemesis? Let me see which day you've cursed me. Damn it. Hearing Yuan Qing mention Fairy Ingshua for no reason, a bitter smile appeared on Ing Chao's face. I can't wait to jinx her one day. Even every day. But I can't compare to a nascent soul cultivator. That old woman sent me a message 100 years ago. Oh? There was such a thing? Could it be that she has taken a liking to you? Yuan Qing's eyes lit up. I don't like her. Ing Chao shook his head. That old head wants me to change my name. Ha! Yuan Qing laughed. Even Zhang Jian, Li Min, and the others couldn't help but smile. The earth-devouring insects lived up to their name. In just the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the several mu of land that was covered with spirit insects had clearly caved in. Good boy. These earth-devouring insects are actually so fierce. If these were real spirit-devouring insects, what would we do? Li Min whispered as he wiped the sweat from his forehead. Hee, brotherly, this time you've made a mistake. Zhang Jian laughed. Although these insects are innately earth-devouring insects, they aren't as fierce as you see. Oh, Li Min suddenly realized. And this is the acid that the blood calamity beast spewed out. Exactly. Zhang Jian clapped his hands. Didn't I just say it? It's all because of your Maze Valley that I'm here. General! We can only accept the challenge, Lon Xian whispered from within Gold Spring Mountain. Tell this disciple to take out the earth-firm talisman that I've been refining for many years. Tu Hong nodded as he heard this. I already knew that this day would come. The earth-firm talisman is for today. Yes. Lon Xian nodded and hurried out. Tu Hong's eyes didn't leave the light screen. Although the earth-devouring insects were fierce and had already swallowed up over a foot of the earth, Tu Hong didn't seem to panic at all. Woo! Between the layers of earth, there were flashes of brilliance. This was the sign that Gold Spring Mountain's disciples were about to attack. The sword cultivators that had been on guard all this time suddenly tightened their faces. They each urged their flying swords to attack the areas that they had already allocated. Ka-cha-cha! Instantly, the cultivators of Jin Shan's sect appeared, and the flying swords of the sword cultivators also attacked. Magic tools and magic treasures clashed with each other, and following that, it was the clashing of the flesh and magic tools. The flesh and bones clashed with the flying swords. Of course, there were careful defenses, of course, there were quick dodges, but there were sharp weapons on all sides of the body, front and back were all ferocious. Even if one could dodge it once, how could one dodge it a second time? In just a moment, miserable screams sounded again. Everywhere, there were lives being reaped. Just as both sides were in the midst of a fierce battle, the layers of earth in the array flashed again. Hundreds of Gold Spring Mountain's disciples suddenly flew out from the array. As soon as they appeared on the battlefield, they didn't care about the other cultivators. Instead, they quickly flew towards the several acres of earth-devouring insects. Without waiting for Yuan Qing and the other sword cultivators to command, the sword cultivators that were extremely close to them immediately flew up to block them. However, this group of Gold Spring Mountain's disciples didn't even bother to fight. Their bodies flew extremely fast. Both of their hands slapped their storage bags and yellow talismans flew out. They turned into fist-sized balls of light that fell in the middle of the earth-devouring insects. Quick, block them! Yuan Qing and the others shouted. When the balls of light fell, the earth in the radius of a few feet immediately flashed with yellow brilliance. When the brilliance was slightly extinguished, it suddenly turned yellow as well. It was actually as hard as a piece of crystal. What shocked the sword cultivators the most was that when the yellow brilliance touched the earth-devouring insects, the earth-devouring insects also started to turn yellow. Following that, the earth-devouring insects stopped moving. It was completely similar to a fist-sized lump of earth. Not good! Zhang Jian was shocked. He anxiously transmitted his voice. The wild beast Manor's disciples who were protected by the swordsman immediately blew the soundless thing. The earth-devouring insects that weren't hit by the earth-hard talisman flapped their wings and wanted to escape. When the Gold Spring Mountain's disciples saw that the earth-hard talisman was effective, why would they let the earth-devouring insects escape? All of them waved their hands. They didn't hit the ground but directly hit the earth-devouring insects. Hundreds and thousands of yellow light balls exploded. Hundreds and thousands of earth-devouring insects turned into lumps of earth and fell to the ground. -8. Chapter 2344. Ha ha ha! Tu Hong sat on a chair in the cave. This was the first time he had laughed so happily since the start of the battle. The heavens are really protecting my Dao sect! The heavens are really protecting my Golden Spring Mountain! That's right, this is a lucky hit! Lon Xian also smiled. Those spirit insects seem to be of the earth attribute. Since the earth-firm talisman is effective against the earth layer, then it must be even more effective against the spirit insects. General, there is no need to worry about this battle. That's right. Tu Hong smiled as he sat on a chair. He waved his hand. Let the sword cultivators madly attack the earth layer. Once they are exhausted, we will kill our way out. General's plan is flawless. This old man truly admires you. Lon Xian was sincerely convinced. Quick, quick! The battle sword above the earth layer couldn't help but fly closer. He hurriedly urged his disciples to gather the earth-devouring insects and avoid the earth-firm talismans. Then, his killing intent surged, and he began to kill the closest Golden Spring Mountain disciples. However, even before these Golden Spring Mountain disciples were killed, they still threw out all of their earth-firm talismans. They completely disregarded their own lives, truly facing death with equanimity. AI, seeing the Golden Spring Mountain disciples fall one by one, and the brilliance in the air gradually extinguished, there weren't many earth-devouring insects left. The battle sword sighed and looked at Yuan Qing. Yuan Qing was also stunned. He never thought that there would be such a turn of events. The joy he had when he was teasing nascent soul cultivators had long disappeared. Fellow sword cultivators, I'm afraid there is no way to break through this earth layer today. Yuan Qing turned to the several leading illusory swordsmen to discuss. How about we temporarily withdraw our troops? Once we have some method, we can come back and kill the cultivators? That's the only way. An illusory swordsman nodded. If we swordsmen clear the earth layer, I'm afraid we will fall into the cultivator's trap. All right, Yuan Qing nodded. Just as he was about to wave his hand, he heard the fat manly Min point his finger and say in surprise, Senior Yuan, look, the spirit-devouring insects are starting to eat the earth again. No, they are starting to eat the earth that was hit by the cultivator's yellow talismans. Ah? Yuan Qing was overjoyed and looked over. Sure enough, the earth-devouring worms that were hit by the earth's sturdy talisman started to move again. They were devouring the yellow soil that was as hard as crystals. Rustle, rustle! The sound was extremely crisp. It seemed that the spirit-swallowing bugs liked it very much. The hard soil was no match for the spirit-swallowing bug's teeth. When the battle sword saw this, even he didn't know why such a mutation occurred. He could only secretly rejoice in his heart. The heavens have blessed my sword domain! Ing Chao laughed loudly. That's right, the heavens are really protecting our sword region. The swordsmen all laughed. Meanwhile, Tu Hong's expression had turned extremely ugly. How is that possible? The earth beneath the earth-firm talisman is even harder than a top-grade crystal stone. Lan Xian whispered, her face ashen. Everything has its vanquisher. Tu Hong sighed dejectedly. Of course, everything had to be subdued. What Xiaohua wanted to subdue was naturally the jade marrow. In order to not leave behind any jade marrow for the sword cultivators, Xiaohua had worked very hard and diligently for nearly 2 days. His heart began to whisper to himself. Damn it, I feel like something is wrong. If Cui Hongshan is Tu Hong's illegitimate son, then I can understand this arrangement. Otherwise, there would never be a meat pie that would fall from the sky. This young master will go and take a look. Xiaohua put away the wishful staff and used a concealment technique to return to where Cui Hongshan and the others were meditating. The 6 idiots were still sitting there obediently. Cui Hongshan didn't dare to put away his captain's token into his storage bag. Instead, he held it in his hands, looking at it from time to time for fear that he would delay the attack. Following the rules, Xiaohua sneered disdainfully. The disciples of the cultivation families are all so inflexible. It's no wonder that it's not easy for them to become characters that can stand proudly on the Dawn Rain continent. Cui Hongshan, if you are like this, then your bullshit dream. I'm afraid it will really be a dream. Then, without a word, Xiaohua fled towards the direction he had come from. Although Xiaohua's memory wasn't very good, after searching for half an hour, he still found the tunnel he had come from. However, at this time, the tunnel had been sealed, and a layer of solid restriction had firmly sealed the entrance of the cave. Huh! Xiaohua's divine sense swept through the restriction, and a trace of surprise appeared on his face. This restriction was very strange. Not only was it thick, but it also absorbed divine sense. Even the spiritual power fluctuations of the restriction were extremely unstable. Which cultivator laid this down? It's really rough. Xiaohua was somewhat disdainful. With a wave of his hand, he took out the rabbit talisman and was about to insert it into the array. However, when his first talisman touched the array, an earthy yellow brilliance immediately flashed, and an extremely slight explosion burst out from the array, like a fried soybean. Looking at the spiritual power fluctuations, it was like pouring water on oil, making a sizzling sound. Ouch! Xiaohua was shocked. He didn't dare to try again, and immediately took back the talisman. It wasn't until the time it took to eat a meal that the spiritual power fluctuations gradually calmed down. Good boy, is the level of the cultivator who laid this array higher than this master or lower than this master? Xiaohua pinched his chin and was somewhat pensive. This array was the defensive array of Jinquan Mountain, and at this time, the cultivators of Jinquan Mountain were fighting with the swordsmen of Huan Country. Perhaps it was a cruel battle above. How could Xiaohua dare to carelessly destroy it? If he wasn't careful, he would become the eternal sinner of the Dao sect, right? This is difficult. Xiaohua shook his head and turned around to look at the surface of the earth. Sure enough, it was as he had expected. The area around him was filled with this kind of extremely unstable formation. Xiaohua frowned and no longer flew upwards. He also didn't check other places, and returned to the place where Cui Hongshan and the others were resting. Seeing Xiaohua return, Cui Hongshan's heart inexplicably calmed down, but his face was still indifferent. He looked up and down at Xiaohua, not even greeting him. Get up! Xiaohua flew in front of everyone and shouted. This Xiao found some problems. Oh? Everyone was surprised and hurriedly got up. Zhen Minghui glanced at Cui Hongshan and turned to ask Xiaohua. Junior brother Xiao, what did you find? We are trapped in an array. Xiaohua glanced at everyone and said, This array seems to be very big. This Xiao didn't have the time to examine it carefully, but it seems that there's only one team of Imperial Thunder Sect disciples here. Ah? Everyone was stunned when they heard this. Fellow Cui, what is your relationship with Tu Hong? Xiaohua looked up and down at Cui Hongshan and asked with bad intentions. What relationship? Cui Hongshan frowned and said curiously. You have already asked this question before, and this Cui has also answered it. Strange. Xiaohua scratched his head and pointed at Jin Minghui. Senior brother Minghui, go to the east side and see if there are any other teams of disciples. And this Jin will go over now. Jin Minghui saw Xiaohua's serious expression and didn't dare to be negligent. This time, he didn't even look at Cui Hongshan and cupped his hands and said. When Jin Minghui turned around, Xiaohua ordered again. Senior brother Su, senior brother Chiu, don't be idle. Take Xinhua and Bai Su Gu to the west side and other places. Yes. Su Qing and Chiu Su didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly waved their hands to take the two Qi refinement disciples. Unexpectedly, Cui Hongshan anxiously said, Wait a moment! Su Qing and the others' eyes quickly turned, their gazes frequently moving between Xiaohua and Cui Hongshan. Why don't you go? Cui Hongshan asked Xiaohua. AI, this Xiao was born with a bad sense of direction. Xiaohua sighed and shrugged. Moreover, this Xiao has an important matter to do. What matter? Cui Hongshan asked. Naturally, it is a mission to minimize the losses of my Dao sect. Hee, you won't understand even if I tell you. Xiaohua waved his hand and said. Yes. Cui Hongshan nodded and turned his head. This Cui will go to the north. You all follow Xiaohua's instructions and go to the west and south. Then, he threw the captain's token to Xiaohua and said, You stay here and guard the left side. If there are any abnormalities on the token, quickly send a communication talisman, or act according to the previous arrangements. Yes. Xiaohua thought for a moment and took the token. He was also afraid that something would really happen. If he was here, he would be far more important than these 6 idiots. However, after watching the 6 people leave, Xiaohua only sat quietly for a moment. It was as if there were sores growing under his butt. The temptation of the jade essence was really too great. Forget it. Let's go and mine the jade essence. Xiaohua got up and fled again. As long as I am within the formation, the token will react. When the time comes, this young master will come back again. Not to mention the discovery of the Imperial Thunder Sect's first team, the earth-devouring worms that were hit by the earth-hard talisman on the Quanjin Mountain stratum became even more ferocious. Not only did they easily devour the soil that was as hard as crystals, even the speed at which they devoured ordinary soil was more than twice as fast. In just half a day's time, 100 jang deep hole had already appeared in the soil stratum. Ha ha ha, cultivators really go for wool and come home shorn! Yuan Qing laughed loudly. Not only did they not use the talisman to kill our spiritual worms, they even helped our spiritual worms mutate. What made this old man the happiest was that their Quanjin Mountain's disciples lost quite a few again. Ha ha ha, that's exactly the case. Battle Sword also laughed loudly at the side. Even this old man did not expect that this cultivator's talisman would actually have an effect on the earth-devouring worms. In the future, this old man still has to try more. Who knows, maybe I can cultivate the spirit-devouring worms. Battle Sword friend, can your earth-devouring worms rest for a while? Ing Chao reminded. If you want to pull the cultivator out from the ground, these earth-devouring worms are a strong aid. You can't kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. Yes, this junior understands. Battle Sword nodded. In another hour, we will let the earth-devouring worms rest. Yes. Ing Chao nodded slightly and said to Yuan Qing. If the earth-devouring worms rest, we sword cultivators should not be idle. Let's all exercise our hands and feet. Consecutive sword formation. All right. Yuan Qing clapped his hands and said, This old man has been feeling a little lonely for the past half a day. Let's use the flying sword too. -8. Chapter 2345. Sure enough, an hour later, after the disciples of the wild beast villa had collected the earth-devouring insects, the sword cultivators once again split into two groups. One group still stood on their swords and guarded in midair, while the other group formed into a formation and attacked the 300-meter-wide black hole. Several hundred sword cultivators with similar sword equipment each took out their flying swords. As the flying swords flew through the air, the similar sword intents on the flying swords resonated with each other, and the several hundred flying swords gradually condensed into a single massive flying sword. The humming of swords emitted from the massive flying sword. It was actually a cultivator's magic weapon. All sorts of heaven and earth spiritual energy began to rapidly surge forth, filling up the gaps between the small flying swords. Go! Several hundred sword cultivators moved their minds, all of them simultaneously chanting the same sword chant. The massive flying swords slowly began to move, and a multicolored sword light condensed into a massive sword light that pierced straight into the black hole. Whoop! The flying sword seemed to tear the air apart. When it entered the black hole, it gave rise to a strange sound of wind whistling. Its power was extremely great. Bang! With a loud explosion, countless clouds of dust burst out from the black hole, shooting straight up into the sky. However, as the winter wind blew, all of this dust was blown away, turning into dust that drifted between the heavens and earth. Oh my God! Seeing the several hundred sword cultivators on the light screen, Lan Xian couldn't help but cry out. This is simply the cultivation of swords. Humph! At most, it's just a little bit closer to the realm of swords. Tu Hong sneered. If their array formation really had the strength to transform into swords, then who would want to fight them? Yes, this old man understands. Lan Xian smiled. It's just that seeing such a fierce sword array for the first time makes me a bit nervous. Tu Hong did not express his opinion. He only squinted his eyes as he watched the swordsmen keep their flying swords and slowly form their formation again. He said faintly, These flying swords look very powerful, but they are useless. Which cultivator would directly face these several hundred swordsmen as an enemy? Even a cultivator whose strength is comparable to a third-grade illusory sword cultivator wouldn't allow them to easily form their sword array. If it were the many cultivators of my Dao sect, would they have the time to form a sword array? It's only because my Jinquan Mountain's array is underground that they are wasting their sword origin for no reason. On top of that, you are strutting around in front of my Golden Spring Mountain. They're just a fox using a tiger's might to intimidate others. Tu Hong sneered. If old brother Lan goes out, they'll definitely be scared witless. I dare not, I dare not! There must be an illusory swordsman beside the sword cultivator. This old man is no match for him. Lan Xian was very humble. She asked, should we take advantage of this time and give them a head-on blow? Wait a little longer. Tu Hong only said 2 words before falling silent. As Lan Xian saw this, she could only stand there in silence, quietly watching this sword cultivator show off his might. He knew in his heart that his cultivation couldn't compare with Tu Hong's, and he was even more inferior to Tu Hong's when it came to commanding troops. In a battle where hundreds of people would die, he really couldn't deal with it. Ha ha ha! Seeing the numerous swordsmen fly out one after another, and the black hole being struck down several hundred feet, Yuan Qing also laughed out loud. He flew up and loudly shouted, all of you retreat, let this old man move his hands and feet. Yes. The swordsmen who had just put away their flying swords and were about to use them again hurriedly agreed and scattered to the side. Yuan Qing flew up into the air. He pointed a finger, and the flying sword beneath his feet shot up into the air. Puff! Yuan Qing opened his mouth and a sword origin shot out, quickly catching up with the flying sword. With a so sound, the flying sword suddenly accelerated, and a small spark flashed from the flying sword. The spark became increasingly hot, gradually expanding. In an instant, the flying sword flew up several dozen feet, and the spark had already turned into a fireball. However, this wasn't the end. The flying sword continued to fly up into the air. The bird cultivators in the air scattered, creating a large gap. Then, the flying sword suddenly burst apart, turning into a giant fireball. Speed Yuan Qing's hands formed a sword seal, and he casually pointed his finger. His expression seemed relaxed, but there was a dignified look in his eyes. When the sound of a sword humming came from the flying sword of a nearby swordsman. Looking at the fireball in the air, it was like a meteor, but also like a blazing sun falling from the heavens. It cut across the horizon, emitting a loud rumbling sound as it smashed into the black hole. Now's the time! Tu Hong and Lan Xian were also watching Yuan Qing show off. Just as Lan Xian was dumbfounded by the might of this flying sword, Tu Hong suddenly shouted out. Oh, Lan Xian was stunned, as if she hadn't reacted yet. Tu Hong's lips curved up in a smile. He pointed his finger at the triangular magic tool, and at the same time, his figure also flew out. On the ground a little further away from the black hole, there was a faint flash of light. At this time, many sword cultivators were scattered in the air, smiles hanging on their faces as they watched Yuan Qing display his skills. No one thought that Tu Hong would suddenly attack the illusory swordsman while he was displaying his power. And Yuan Qing's attention was also on the flying sword. When the meteor-like flying sword smashed into the black hole, a burst of battle cries resounded through Gold Spring Mountain. Boom! There was an earth-shattering tremor. The entire ground was shaking. This boom was not only from Yuan Qing's flying sword, but also the sound of thousands of ambushing cultivators' artifacts and treasures hitting the sword cultivator's body. Ah! The sword cultivators were obviously caught off guard. As soon as they came into contact with the flying sword, over a dozen sword cultivators were struck by their magic tools, and their bodies fell from the sky. Damn it! Yuan Qing had already noticed the commotion when the flying sword fell. But his sword seal had already been formed, and he couldn't stop the flying sword, so he had no choice but to drive the flying sword into the black hole. Seeing the sword cultivators fall, he flew into a rage out of humiliation. He pointed his finger, and the blazing sun once again flew out from the black hole, piercing straight towards the many Foundation establishment cultivators. The intense sword light was like a glaring sun as it struck the cultivators. Not to mention the cultivators fighting back, they couldn't even open their eyes. Yuan Qing! Your opponent is this general! A roar sounded from the ground. A yellow light flashed, and Tu Hong's figure appeared in the air. Oh! Yuan Qing heard a cultivator call out his name. He was surprised, but he didn't withdraw the sword seal in his hand. Go! Tu Hong waved his hand, and the serpent spear he was holding in his hand flew into the air. Roar! The serpent's spear whistled through the air, and it actually transformed into a yellow serpent that charged towards the scorching sun. The bloody snake opened its mouth wide, as if it wanted to swallow the blazing sun in one gulp. -8. Chapter 2346. Ha! So you are the golden core cultivator from Golden Spring Mountain! Yuan Qing laughed as he activated his sword art and said, You actually managed to find out my name. Seems like you want to have a taste of my power. Woo! The huge python circled in the air and a large amount of earth attribute spiritual energy quickly condensed, blocking many cultivators under its body. The huge mouth swallowed the sun into its stomach. Instantly, the entire battlefield dimmed and the screams of the sword cultivators seemed to have weakened. However, Tu Hong's face was still grim while Yuan Qing's face was calm, which was thought-provoking. Tu Hong activated his magic power, and while controlling his magic treasure, he quickly released his spiritual sense to scan Ing Chao and the rest. However, when his spiritual sense scanned Ling Yunwu and the other illusory swordsmen, his face changed. Maybe it was because of his shock that his state of mind was disturbed, or maybe it was because his magic power was not enough to suppress Yuan Qing's flying sword. Yuan Qing slightly raised his sword art and shouted, Break! Numerous light rays faintly penetrated the body of the huge yellow python. Following which, the number of light rays increased rapidly, and the huge python's abdomen expanded rapidly. With a loud ping, a scorching aura was emitted from the huge python. The flying sword actually broke through the huge python's encirclement and rushed out. Furthermore, the flying sword did not seem to stop. It rapidly expanded and contracted a few times and immediately turned into a fiery red stream of light and pierced towards Tu Hong. This time, the flying sword was different from the previous one. It did not have much power and only countless sparks could be seen from the stream of light. However, Tu Hong, who was in the middle of the battle, did not have a relaxed expression on his face. A huge pressure appeared in the air, and when Tu Hong scanned the flying sword with his divine sense, he could feel the powerful force contained within the flying sword. He did not dare to slack off. The attack power of a sword cultivator was not a joke, not to mention the flying sword of an illusory sword cultivator. Go! Tu Hong waved his hand and the magic treasure which had already reverted back to its spear form drew an arc in the air and stabbed towards the flying sword. With a loud kung, the spear and the flying sword collided and countless sparks splashed out. An unpleasant screeching sound came from the point of collision between the spear and the flying sword, rapidly spreading to the entire battlefield. Nearly a dozen cultivators and swordsmen couldn't bear the ear-piercing sound and fell from the sky one after another. The flying sword looked like a fireball that had been doused with water, floating in the air dimly. Tu Hong's spear also flipped a few times in the air, floating at a slanted angle to the side. You also know sword cultivation? A trace of surprise flashed across Yuan Qing's eyes as he asked. Then, he looked at Tu Hong's martial attire and said thoughtfully, Even if you have never practiced flying swords, you are still somewhat related to my sword domain. Humph, sword cultivators are indeed arrogant. You guys are too conceited. Could it be that the flying swords of my Dao sect are inferior to the flying swords of your swordsmen? Can I, too, know a little bit about flying sword techniques? Tu Hong laughed coldly. If a cultivator from my Dao sect used a flying sword to kill a swordsman from sword cultivator, would you say that he was definitely a swordsman from sword cultivator? And all flows return to origin. It is said that no matter if it is a cultivator or a swordsman, they are all the same in the immortal realm. Your knowledge is not bad. Yuan Qing still had a strong attitude and asked again. Since you know that I am Yuan Qing, why don't you report your name? Humph, when two armies are facing each other, knowing the enemy and knowing yourself will ensure victory. Tu Hong laughed coldly. You sword cultivators have besieged my Golden Spring Mountain for many days and have already investigated the situation of my Golden Spring Mountain. How is it possible that you don't even know my name? When Yuan Qing heard this, his face turned red. He really didn't think so much. Your father will kill you. Why would I care who you are? Yuan Qing waved his hand and the flying sword landed in his hand. An illusory swordsman is only SOSO. Tu Hong naturally wouldn't back down. Haha, then this old man will let you see what a real illusory sword is. Yuan Qing laughed loudly and his body slowly flew up. He activated the true Yuan in his body and a brilliant sword light shot out from Yuan Qing's body. An unusually hot sword essence rushed out uncontrollably. At this moment, Li Min and Ying Chao, who were the closest to Yuan Qing, couldn't bear it and hurriedly flew back. They only stopped after flying back a few hundred feet. Yuan Qing's body emitted flames which heated up the surrounding air. The sword light followed the flames and rushed into the long sword in his hand. Hence, the flying sword became even brighter and gradually elongated. At the same time, as the flying sword elongated, Yuan Qing's body started to turn illusory and elongated. He seemed to be fusing with the flying sword. Seeing such a situation, how could Tu Hong wait any longer? He waved his hand and activated his true Yuan. The long spear once again turned into a giant python and rushed towards Yuan Qing. At the same time, Tu Hong's hands formed seals again, and the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth condensed around him. It was another familiar sword hum. However, this sword hum was getting louder and louder. When it reached its peak, Yuan Qing's flying sword fused with his arms, and his figure was faintly switching between a sword and a human form. At this moment, Tu Hong's long spear was already in front of him. There was a faint stench coming from the bloody snake's mouth. Yuan Qing raised his arms slightly, and the long sword drew a line in the air. It seemed slow, but in reality it was very fast. In an instant, it reached the mouth of the long spear first. Clang! Once again, there was a collision sound. However, unlike before, when the long spear collided with the long sword, it immediately split into three. The three shadows bypassed the flying sword and rushed towards Yuan Qing. Haha, your Taoist sect likes to play with such superficial things. Yuan Qing's voice was as sonorous as gold and stone. Then, the long sword split into three rays of sword light that were even faster than the long spear. In an instant, they hit the giant python's shadow. However, at this moment, something strange happened again. Hundreds of earth spikes suddenly shot out from the mountain where Yuan Qing was. These earth spikes rushed into the air, and the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth also condensed into a part of the earth spikes. They were all aimed at Yuan Qing's legs at an extremely fast speed. You do have some tricks up your sleeve! Yuan Qing was slightly stunned. He hurriedly waved his hand and a few more rays of sword light flew over. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. They cut off the earth spikes. They were extremely sharp. However, as soon as the sword light flashed, countless spikes suddenly appeared in the space several feet around Yuan Qing like branches and vines, closing in on Yuan Qing's body. Yuan Qing was a little surprised. It was easy to cut off the earth spikes horizontally. However, the sharp spikes were shining with a dark light. They were not easy to deal with. Yuan Qing did not dare to be careless. Sword light flowed around his body and his figure gradually disappeared. He turned into a long sword that pointed to the sky. Crack! The earth spikes quickly spread out and quickly covered Yuan Qing. Then, they suddenly closed up and tightly wrapped around Yuan Qing. However, Ying Chao and the others watched from afar and had no intention of helping. Spike! Tu Hong's face flashed with a hint of savagery. He grabbed at the compressed earth spikes and was about to activate his Dharma power again. At this moment, a sharp ray of sword light suddenly shot out from the yellow earth spikes. It slashed through the earth spikes and a flying sword flew out from the earth spikes. Ha! Yuan Qing's maniacal laughter came from the flying sword. Then, his body could no longer maintain the sword form. A few rays of sword light flashed and appeared. How can the Taoist sect know about my sword cultivator's Dharma power? Yuan Qing raised his eyebrows and said, Your Dharma power is indeed powerful. However, against a sword cultivator like me, it's just a small trick. Is that so? Tu Hong sneered. He suddenly waved his other hand that had been hidden in his Taoist robe. A wave of spiritual power suddenly trembled around Tu Hong. Ah? This is? Yuan Qing was stunned. His eyes flashed as he saw the remains of the 6 long spears that he had cut in half earlier surrounding him. Rumble. As soon as Yuan Qing saw the remains of the spear, the 6 spear remains began to shine with a bright yellow light and exploded like fireworks. An extremely strong tearing force rushed toward Yuan Qing's body. This is bad! Seeing Tu Hong explode his Dharma treasure, Yuan Qing was shocked. He quickly flew up and tried to escape. However, he was still too slow. The 6 forces tore at his body like 6 large hands and threw him high into the sky. What scared Yuan Qing the most was that he had barely dodged the 6 forces. The spikes that he had broken free from earlier were also ignited by the Dharma treasure. An even stronger explosive force rushed toward him. Pooh! Yuan Qing was shocked. He could no longer hold back. He opened his mouth and a blood-red ray of sword light flew out. It was like a shooting star that pierced toward the exploding spikes. It was extremely strange. When the ray of sword light pierced through, it was as if it had pierced through a pocket. The exploding spikes suddenly deflated and shrank toward the spot where the ray of sword light had pierced through. Then, they disappeared. The small sword that had pierced through the exploding spikes had also become much dimmer. Ha ha ha, Yuan Qing, you old thief, how's my technique? Tu Hong laughed loudly. Then, his body flashed with earth-yellow light again. His body landed on the ground and disappeared. At the same time, many other Dao sect cultivators also left the battlefield and landed on the ground. They also disappeared like Tu Hong. One. A loud sword hum sounded and a fiery red ray of sword light flashed. Yuan Qing transformed into a long sword and slashed at the spot where Tu Hong had disappeared. Boom, boom, boom! A huge crack that was dozens of feet deep appeared on the ground. When the long sword transformed back into Yuan Qing's human form, his face turned pale. Despicable brat! Yuan Qing's eyes were wide open as he stood in midair. The long sword in his hand was like a rainbow as he shouted loudly. Yes, Yuan Qing was a 3rd-grade illusory swordsman. His strength was comparable to a late-stage Golden Core Realm cultivator. In terms of attack power, he was even stronger than a late-stage Golden Core Realm cultivator. Previously, when he used the flying sword, his strength was definitely not something that Tu Hong could compare to. However, Tu Hong made use of the flying sword divine ability that he had just used to attack him. Then, he used the exploding spikes and the explosion of his magic treasure to trap Yuan Qing. Although Yuan Qing did not suffer any serious injuries and only suffered some minor injuries due to the depletion of his sword origin, but, when he thought about it, Tu Hong was only at the peak of the early-stage Golden Core Realm. He had not even reached the mid-stage Golden Core Realm. Yuan Qing's face was really a big loss. -8. Chapter 2347. Haha, sword friend Yuan Qing! Ing Chao flew over and said with a smile. This cultivator named Tu from Jiquan Mountain is really sinister. He actually took advantage of the fact that you just used up your sword origin to launch a sneak attack. It's normal that you couldn't kill him. Hearing Ing Chao mention Tu Hong's death, Yuan Qing's face turned red. To be honest, he really did look down on Tu Hong and wanted to play with him. He wanted to show off the power of the skyscraping sword sect in front of so many sword cultivators and bird cultivators, and vent the anger of the sword cultivators who lost their lives over the past few days. But everything seemed to be out of his expectations. Sigh, I have still underestimated this Dao sect cultivator. Yuan Qing was helpless and could only sigh and admit. They definitely can't beat us sword cultivators in terms of fighting, but their mysterious secret techniques and spells are really troublesome. That's right. Ling Yunwu also flew over and said with a smile. If not, how could a thunder-controlling sect disciple pretend to be a foundation establishment cultivator? How could a group of sword cultivators be intimidated? If not, how could I invite more than 10 illusory swordsmen to deal with this thunder-controlling sect disciple? Yuan Qing seemed to empathize with him, and immediately sympathized with Ling Yinwu. He asked again, "That golden core cultivator wasn't the one you were looking for, right?" "No." Ling Yinwu shook his head. "This person was dressed in martial attire and called himself a cultivator from Jinquan Mountain. He's not a thunder-controlling sect disciple. Also, I've observed for a long time, none of the Dao sect disciples that appeared were wearing the thunder-controlling sect uniform. How's the damage just now?" Yuan Qing glanced at Ing Chao and asked in a low voice. "I've asked the disciples in the sky to do some calculations. The Dao sect cultivator's sneak attack just now killed about 230 warriors of the sword domain." Ing Chao also replied in a low voice. "Also, the Dao sect cultivator was prepared. This time, only 70 cultivator corpses were left." Yuan Qing let out a long sigh. He looked at the deep pit and said coldly, "Valley Masterly, how's your earth-devouring bug?" "Okay, Senior Yuan, we still have to wait for another 2 hours," Li Min hurriedly replied. "All right, brave warriors of Sword Region. Continue to vent your anger on the cultivators underground." Yuan Qing waved his hand and said, "This time, the Dao sect cultivators will definitely not dare to launch a sneak attack." "Yes." The sword cultivators were already burning with rage after being ambushed by the cultivators. When they heard Yuan Qing's command, they cheered loudly and rearranged their formation to attack the black hole. Inside the Golden Spring Mountain, Tu Hong's face was covered in a layer of faint golden color. He was sitting on a chair and adjusting his breath. A layer of yellow brilliance was flowing around his body, emitting a faint glow. Lan Xian looked at him for a moment, and then quietly walked out. After an hour, Lan Xian quietly returned once more. Tu Hong had already returned to his original appearance. "General," Lan Xian glanced at the light screen above the magic tool and whispered, "Those strange spirit insects have been released again. Let's hold on for now." Tu Hong sighed and waved his hand. "The cultivators of my Golden Spring Mountain are far too weak compared to the swordsmen. Let's gather our strength first and wait for the final battle. General, for you to injure that illusory sword cultivator is already commendable. There is no need to blame yourself." Lan Xian misunderstood and quickly comforted him. "Haha, old brother Lan." Tu Hong waved his hand and smiled. "Although that Yuan Qing's cultivation is at the late golden core stage, I really made him eat a loss just now. Although I had to abandon my magic tool and was only slightly injured, Yuan Qing's injuries are definitely worse than mine. To be able to make a late golden core swordsman fall under my hands, even if I die I will still be happy. This old man was also frightened just now." Lan Xian didn't hide her feelings and smiled apologetically. Tu Hong pointed at the light screen and said, "Not only are the disciples of my Golden Spring Mountain inferior to the sword cultivators outside, but the high-level disciples are also inferior. Look here, where the light screen cannot see, there are dozens of illusory swordsmen standing there. None of them are inferior to Yuan Qing." "Ah? Dozens of illusory swordsmen?" Lan Xian was dumbfounded. "How could a sword cultivator invest so many illusory swords in my Golden Spring Mountain? This doesn't make sense." Who knows?" Tu Hong didn't lose his composure like Lan Xian. He coldly said, "The more they come, the happier I will be." "General." Lan Xian hesitated for a moment, hesitating. "What's wrong?" Tu Hong curiously asked. "Does old brother Lan have something to say?" "The cultivators of the Dao sect, they have something to say," Lan Xian whispered. "If General hadn't decisively killed the Golden Spring Mountain disciple last time, I'm afraid they would have come knocking on our door. These damned cultivators!" Tu Hong gnashed his teeth. "They claim to be the orthodox disciples of the Dao sect, they don't even place my Sky Patrol city in their eyes. What do they know about deploying troops? What do they know about the Dao of illusions?" "That's right." Lan Xian bitterly smiled. They say that my Golden Spring Mountain has too few disciples and that they are all hiding somewhere, so they have to go out and risk their lives. Hearing this, Tu Hong wasn't angry. Instead, he smiled and said, These disciples of the Tao sect are quite smart. That's enough. Tell them to cultivate in seclusion. In a few days, that sword cultivator's spirit insects will swallow up the earth layer into the defensive array formation. At that time, we will have our final battle. If we are not their match, then we will abandon this Golden Spring Mountain Spirit Stone Mine. That's not good. Lan Xian whispered. Weakening our morale without fighting is not the way to win. Moreover, if those Tao sect cultivators hear this, won't they all run away? Hee, this old man wants them to run away, but do you think those sword cultivators will agree? Tu Hong sneered. If they want to live, then their only choice is to desperately kill the enemy. Yes, this old man understands. Lan Xian nodded and turned to leave. Looking at Lan Xian's back, Tu Hong's eyes fell on the light screen. He frowned, thinking to himself, how come there are suddenly over a dozen illusory swordsmen? These illusory swordsmen don't seem to be from the sword faction that is responsible for this area. What are they doing here? That's right, even if Tu Hong cracked his head he still wouldn't know that these illusory swordsmen had come for Xiao Hua, who was still at the bottom of the Spirit Stone Mine. How is it? Several days passed. Seeing that there was no movement from the captain's token, Xiao Hua had no choice but to come out and take a look. At this time, Cui Hongshan and the others had already returned. Xiao Hua looked at their grim expressions and asked in a low voice. Good, junior apprentice brother Xiao knows. Jin Minghui said. We've looked all around, and it really is the same as junior apprentice brother said. There isn't a single cultivator here. There isn't any movement at all. -8. Chapter 2348. I also tried to send a transmission talisman to Fan Yuan and the others, but there was no response. Cui Hongshan's expression was somewhat abnormal, but it wasn't as ugly as Jin Minghui and the others. He said, It seems we are trapped in a formation. It's good that you know. Do you have any ideas? Xiao Hua returned the captain's token to Cui Hongshan and asked. Actually, there is no need for any good ideas. Cui Hongshan squeezed out a smile and said, Maybe Senior Tu Hong has other arrangements. We have other important matters to attend to here. Are you sure you can send your magic power into the formation? Xiao Hua couldn't help but mock. In any case, I am confident I don't have this ability. You! How could Cui Hongshan not hear Xiao Hua's mockery? He said angrily. I know your cultivation is deeper than mine, but you don't need to remind me all the time, right? Senior Tu Hong is a senior expert, the commander of the army. He definitely has his reasons for arranging us here. Even if there are some mistakes, I'm afraid it is unintentional. As for the intention to harm others that you are projecting, he definitely won't have it. How do you know? Is Tu Hong Cui Hong? Xiao Hua asked. Some people don't need to be understood. Cui Hongshan sneered. You only need to look at these people and you will admire them from the bottom of your heart, and obey them from the bottom of your heart. This is where the charm of a person lies. Although this Cui has only met Senior Tu Hong a few times, from the first time this Cui saw him, I knew that this was the kind of person he was. He is someone I can entrust my life to. Good boy. You are really amazing. Xiao Hua smacked his lips and sneered. You don't even recognize this Xiao as your senior brother from the same sect, and you don't even care about this Xiao saving your life. You dare to entrust your life to someone you've never met before? Humph, my life was saved by you. You can take it away at any time if you want. Cui Hongshan didn't show any weakness. But you can't control my thoughts. Could it be that you've never met such a person? You only met once and you can treat each other with sincerity? This? Xiao Hua was at a loss. There was Fairy Hong Xia. He only met her once and their hearts were connected. The second time they met, the third time, damn it, it was even more excessive. Where's the guy? Naturally, it was Z. It was a very strange feeling. Although Xiaohua might not dare to entrust his life to Ziyi, the power of his trust was undeniable. All right. Your eloquence can't be said. It's much stronger than your cultivation. This Xiao won't compete with you in this. Xiaohua didn't admit it. He pointed his hand and said, Zhenhua, come here. Oh yes, Martial Uncle Xiao, Zhenhua said respectfully. At this moment, he held this martial Uncle Xiao in high esteem. Not to mention that Xiaohua's cultivation was so profound that it made him dizzy. Just the fact that Xiaohua didn't put in much effort and there were already a lot of good things in his storage bag was enough to make him obediently listen to Xiaohua. Come with me. Xiaohua turned around and left. Yes. Zhenhua didn't dare to delay and hurriedly followed. After more than half a day, Xiaohua brought Zhenhua back again. Looking at Zhenhua's baffled appearance, Cui Hongxun was also baffled. He raised his eyes and asked, Xiaohua, in this gourd of yours, what kind of medicine did you buy? If you want to live, then listen to this Xiao. Xiaohua was too lazy to explain to him. If you have anything you're curious about, just ask him. After saying that, he flew away again without stopping. Zhenhua, what did he do to you? Cui Hongxun asked curiously. This disciple also doesn't know. Zhenhua was extremely bewildered. Martial Uncle Xiao only called this disciple out. Then, this disciple's vision turned black and I didn't know anything. After waking up, Martial Uncle Xiao kept asking this disciple, How do you feel? How's the true qi in your body? Your cultivation hasn't changed, right? And other such extremely strange questions. And then? Cui Hongxun asked. And then? Then Martial Uncle Xiao brought this disciple back. Zhenhua was also puzzled. How long has it been? You don't know what happened? Baisuge asked in surprise. Half a day? Zhenhua scratched his head and smiled apologetically. This disciple's vision indeed turned black and I don't know anything. Then, did your cultivation change? Jin Minghui came to his senses and hurriedly asked. No, this disciple exercised his mental cultivation method. After checking for a long time, I didn't find any abnormalities. Zhenhua said very decisively. Jin Minghui looked at Cui Hongxun. The two of them were a little dumbfounded. They really couldn't think of what Xiaohua did to Zhenhua. Forget it. Su Qing waved her hand and said, Anyway, junior brother Xiao won't harm us. Let's just listen to his arrangements. What else could they do? Cui Hongxun was dejected and sat on the ground. Looking at the unresponsive captain's token in his hand, his eyes were dull. He really didn't know what to do. But at this moment, the captain's token emitted a faint spiritual energy fluctuation. Cui Hongxun rubbed his eyes in disbelief and hurriedly shouted. Xiaohua, quickly look, the captain's token has reacted. Senior Tu Hong ordered us to attack. Xiaohua, quickly, send a message to Xiaohua. Cui Hongxun hurriedly ordered Jin Minghui. Let him come and see. Senior Tu Hong definitely didn't lie to us. Cui Hongxun seemed to have grabbed onto a life-saving straw. Yes. Jin Minghui hurriedly sent out the communication talisman. When Xiaohua returned, Cui Hongxun handed the captain's token to him as if he was presenting a treasure and said, Take a look, Senior Tu Hong has issued an order for us to attack. Oh? Attack from here? Xiaohua was obviously stunned and somewhat didn't dare to believe it. This seems a little inappropriate. Cui Hongxun released his divine sense and didn't see any formation, so he hesitated and said, Then can we fly a little higher? Jin Minghui's brain was active, and he immediately asked. Then, let's go up and take a look. Cui Hongxun nodded. The closer we are to the formation, the more we can activate our magic power defense. Okay. Xiaohua could only agree and nod. Seeing that Xiaohua was the same, everyone flew out of the cave. Under Cui Hongxun's lead, they flew up the path that Cui Hongxun had previously explored. After flying for an hour, Cui Hongxun's captain's token suddenly emitted a strong spiritual energy fluctuation. Then, A fluctuation that was 100 times stronger swept across the captain's token and swept across everyone's body. Oh! Xiaohua was stunned and hurriedly released his divine sense. Previously, his divine sense couldn't reach far because it was blocked by the special layer of soil of Mount Quanjing. But now, without any obstruction, it swept out in an instant. Xiaohua's expression changed greatly and he shouted, "Cui Hongshan! You are! Forget it, do you still want to live? Ah? Why is that?" Cui Hongshan was also flustered. Just as he was about to sweep his divine sense out, who knew that before his divine sense could leave his body, dozens of divine senses swept over like sharp swords and locked onto everyone in an instant. And after the dozens of divine senses, there were even hundreds of divine senses following behind. "Yes," everyone said without hesitation. "Okay," Xiaohua also nodded. He hurriedly stretched out his hand and untied a spirit storage pouch from his waist. He reached out and grabbed the back of Cui Hongshan's neck. His thumb pinched the back of Cui Hongshan's neck and Cui Hongshan fainted. Xiaohua threw Cui Hongshan into the spirit storage pouch, no different from throwing a little duck. This? Jin Minghui and the rest opened their eyes wide. They finally understood why Zhenhua had been unconscious for half a day, and why Xiaohua asked if Zhenhua was injured. "Damn it, do you still want to live? Quickly come over!" Xiaohua shouted and waved his hand again. Zhenhua fell into his hand without any strength to fight back and was thrown into the spirit storage pouch again. "I thought of this method with great difficulty. Don't worry, as long as I don't die, nothing will happen to you." Okay, although Jin Minghui and the rest were extremely unhappy, who could say anything? Falling into the spirit storage pouch would be treated the same as a spirit beast. At least it was better than falling into the hands of a sword cultivator and dying. However, to put a cultivator into the spirit storage pouch, perhaps only a fierce person like Xiaohua could think of such a cunning idea. Xiaohua didn't care about what they thought. After putting the 6 days' birds into the spirit storage pouch, he waved his hand and put them into the space. He raised his head and looked up, then turned around and flew down. Yuan Qing stood on the scorching sun sword with a trace of excitement on his face. He watched as the sword cultivators formed a group and struck the huge sword shadows into the ground. The dust that soared into the sky earlier could no longer fly high because the black hole that led to the Jingquan Mountain Spirit Stone Mine was already very deep. After waiting for the huge sword shadows to fiercely attack a few more times, Yuan Qing swept his divine sense and waved his hand. "Disciples, take a rest. Conserve your energy. Disciples of the Mad Beast Manor, now that the Jingquan Mountain's defensive array is about to be exposed, release your earth-devouring bugs. Make the final attack. As long as we can take down this Spirit Stone Mine, your Mad Beast Manor will have the greatest merit. At that time, there will be no shortage of Spirit Stones for you. Yes, this disciple understands." The many disciples of the Mad Beast Manor had excited expressions as they loudly responded. The battle sword flew to Yuan Qing's side and said with a smile, "Disciples, all of you have worked hard for the past few days. Not only have I seen it, the warriors of Sword Region have also remembered it in their hearts. All of your hard work will not be in vain. Just like what Villa Master said before coming here, all of you are the role models of my wild beast Villa. Good, this old man won't say any unnecessary words. You all can command the earth-devouring bugs and finish the job in one fell swoop." "Yes," the disciples responded, accompanied by the buzzing sounds of insects. In these past few days, the earth-devouring bugs seemed to have grown in size as they flew out from the hands of the disciples. They were like dark clouds that covered the sky as they flew into the black hole. "General!" Lan Xian's eyes were a bit tired. She looked at the light screen and whispered, "It's time for the disciples to go out. We've been avoiding battle for several days now. The momentum of these cultivators is very weak." Tu Hong had already returned to normal. His eyes shined as he glanced at Lan Xian and asked, "Are the cultivators of the Dao sect still complaining?" -8. Chapter 2349. Yes, there are more and more complaints, Lon Xian replied without hesitation. Moreover, even my Golden Spring Mountain disciples have some doubts. After all, there are thousands of disciples that have gone missing. What did they say? What rumors are there? Our Golden Spring Mountain disciples are naturally incomparable to those Dao sect cultivators. General's military discipline is strict and strict. They only have some doubts, but they don't dare to talk too much. Tu Hong's eyes flashed with gratification. He nodded. Fortunately, these disciples have not disappointed this old man's many years of training. But he also had some regret. He whispered, Unfortunately, in the face of such a great enemy, this old man cannot do anything alone. I fear that I will have to disappoint them, General can rest assured. Lon Xian cupped her hands across her chest. Not to mention the ordinary Golden Spring Mountain disciples, even this old man has long since decided to follow General. In my heart, I have already decided to live and die with Golden Spring Mountain and pursue General. Ha ha, since we can die together, then we can live together. Tu Hong lifted his hand and smiled. In truth, the situation isn't that terrible. Dozens of illusory swordsmen. Lon Xian's eyes flashed with despair. Tu Hong had already seen this, but he didn't say anything. He only smiled and said, Old brother Lon, you can rest assured. Since I dare to say this, then the disciples of Golden Spring Mountain will definitely have a chance to survive. But Lon Xian was still skeptical. She knew that those thousands of Golden Spring Mountain disciples had been hidden by Tu Hong, but no matter how many disciples there were, it was impossible for them to be a match for dozens of late Golden Core cultivators. Thinking of this, Lon Xian's eyes flashed with understanding. Good! At this time, Tu Hong's eyes shrank. He grit his teeth and slowly stood up. He ordered, Old brother Lon, the sword cultivators have already approached my Golden Spring Mountain's defensive array formation. Life or death will be decided here. Inform the disciples to immediately meet the enemy. As long as we can drag them into the Spirit Stone mine, their mission will be complete. They can escape. Ah? Lon Xian was stunned. But after a moment, she hesitated. Then, what about the Dao sect cultivators? Them? Tu Hong smiled and waved his hand. Life and death is up to fate, riches and honor is up to the heavens. Yes, subordinate understands. Lon Xian cupped her hands together. Her eyes swept over the curtain of light, and then she hurried away. On the light screen, a deep black line had already touched the blood-red line. On the ground, Yuan Qing stared coldly at the black hole. The spiritual energy fluctuation in the black hole was getting stronger. Suddenly, Yuan Qing raised his eyebrows and a hint of a smile flashed through his eyes as he shouted, Disciples, prepare to attack. The cowardly cultivators finally can't take it anymore. Ha! Upon hearing Yuan Qing's voice transmission, all the sword cultivator disciples perked up. Each of them activated the flying swords beneath their feet and waited for the battle to begin. The bird cultivators in the sky also flew down, covering the sky above Golden Fountain Mountain. They seemed to be preparing to attack the cultivators of Golden Fountain Mountain, and also seemed to be preventing the disciples of Golden Fountain Mountain from escaping. Indeed, the moment Yuan Qing's voice landed, the entire area started to flicker. The cultivators of Jin Quan Mountain all rushed out from the light like a swarm of bees. The magic tools and treasures in their hands were the same as before, attacking towards the sword cultivator. However, the cultivators this time were clearly different from before. Not only were there several times more people, but the cultivators' ranks were also much higher. Ha ha! The cultivators are still struggling on the verge of death. Yuan Qing laughed heartily, but he did not go up. His target was Tu Hong. Moreover, the swordsmen had indeed made great progress in the past few days of fighting. Regardless of whether it was their teamwork or killing, Yuan Qing and the other swordsmen were extremely satisfied. He Fang Yuan was feeling a little tired. He only had 3 Tai Ching sect disciples left. When his Tai Ching sect disciples left Patrol Heaven City, there were 11 of them. When they were attacked by the beast cultivators, 4 of them died, leaving only 7. When they encountered the bird cultivators, another disciple escaped and was killed by the bird cultivators. Thus, only 6 disciples came to Golden Fountain Mountain. In the previous few days of fighting, although he was extremely careful, 2 Foundation Establishment initial stage disciples were still killed by the sword cultivators. Where did Xiaohua go? At this moment, He Fangyuan could not help but think of Xiaohua, who forced the bird cultivators to retreat. If this fierce person was here, I would not have died. However, He Fangyuan had already released his divine sense. Like the previous few times, there was not a single Imperial Thunder Sect disciple on the battlefield. Maybe they have already escaped from the battlefield? Or there are other arrangements? He Fangyuan only had this trace of doubt, but he did not think about anything else. The green ring in his hand flew out, and blocked a dust-like flying sword that was flying towards him. However, it was only able to block it for a brief moment. The flying sword that was like smoke and dust wrapped around the ring in an instant. Then, it split into several more flying swords that pierced diagonally and rushed out again. Quick! He Fangyuan did not seem to panic. He made a hand seal and the green ring produced a strong suction force. The dust-like flying sword was immediately sucked into the ring, and turned into a 1-foot-long flying sword. The other flying swords were also sucked back. However, the flying sword had just returned to its original form when a layer of dark blue sword light flashed on it. A tearing force that was comparable to the suction force of the ring was produced. With a buzzing sound, the flying sword spun and flew out like a sharp awl. It was like an arrow that had been pulled taut from a bow, pulling the ring down several feet. Hiss! He Fangyuan sucked in a breath of cold air. The magic power in his body poured into the ring like a torrential flood. The ring also shone brightly, trying to restrain the flying sword. However, not far from He Fangyuan, there was a petite female swordsman with a face full of disdain. She was wearing a sword outfit, and her hands were forming a sword seal. Her small mouth slightly opened as she shouted, "Break!" As the female cultivator's sword essence circulated, a huge force was emitted from the flying sword. With a piercing sound, the flying sword flew out of the ring and pierced towards He Fangyuan's forehead like an arrow leaving the bow. Ah! He Fangyuan was shocked, but he was not too flustered. He was controlling the ring, and when the ring was unable to continue, he was already alert. Seeing the flying sword's sharpness, he did not have absolute confidence in blocking it. He could only use his magic power to fly and dodge to the side. He Fangyuan had just dodged when a miserable scream came from behind him. He Fangyuan's divine sense scanned and saw a fist-sized hole in the chest of a Jin Quan Mountain disciple. Blood was flowing out of the hole as his body fell from the sky. His eyes were still open as he stared hatefully at He Fangyuan. "Sigh, brother, don't blame me!" He Fangyuan sighed inwardly. However, right at this moment, an unparalleled sense of vigilance emerged from his back. Almost without thinking, his body could not fly downwards, and instead, his body abruptly fell downwards. -8. Chapter 2350. With a swoosh, a palm-sized flying sword brushed past his head, shattering his defensive yellow talisman, and even slicing off a long strand of his black hair, causing beads of blood to appear on his pale white scalp. He Fangyuan didn't dare to think any further. He clapped his hands and took out several defensive yellow talismans, hurriedly placing them on his body. At the same time, he was still worried and used a few spells. Only when his body emitted a faint light again did he finally relax. However, he had just stopped when that fierce female cultivator's flying sword flew close again. The flying sword that was like mist and smoke covered him like a fine net. He Fangyuan couldn't recall the cyan ring in time. He used both his hands to continuously use spells and slapped his storage bag, throwing out a dozen yellow talismans. With a rumbling sound, the fire net talisman transformed into a fire net that blocked in front of the flying sword. A series of ice balls also appeared in the air, but these yellow talismans, which usually looked powerful, were slightly penetrated by the smoke net. A crack appeared in the middle of all the talismans. They simply didn't wait for the magic power to explode before they were annihilated. Naturally, Fang Yuan took advantage of this gap and held the ring in his hand. Just as he was about to activate his Fa Li, suddenly, a 1-meter-long fire crane appeared in the air with a caw sound. With a whistling sound, it pounced on the female swordsman who was proudly activating her flying sword in the air. Ah! The female swordsman was shocked. Sword light flashed around her body as she tried to dodge the flamingo while resisting the intense flames. The flamingo was too fast and too sudden. The female swordsman had just seen the flamingo when it pounced on her body. Moreover, it instantly passed through the female swordsman's sword light defense and set her body on fire. The female swordsman tried her best to use sword essence, wanting to extinguish the flames. However, the sword essence was like adding fuel to the fire, causing the flames to burn even more fiercely. Kill! Fang Yuan was overjoyed at the sight of this, and without any hesitation, he took out the green ring. That ring spun in the air and directly hit the female sword cultivator's head, breaking it effortlessly. As the female swordsman's corpse fell from the air, Fang Yuan shouted, "Xiao Hua! Junior brother Xiao?" However, where would Xiao Hua's reply come from? What was even stranger was that the flaming crane did not appear again, as if no one had sent it out. "Run!" Fang Yuan scanned with his divine sense. The number of swordsmen had already exceeded the number of cultivators. He did not dare to hesitate any longer. Furthermore, he had already received private messages from the cultivators. This was the last battle. Jin Quan Mountain's disciples were already prepared to retreat. Although the Dao sect's cultivators did not receive any orders, they had already decided, as long as they fought, they would escape. Alas! Fang Yuan sighed inwardly. The Tai Ching sect disciple closest to him was currently engaged in a battle with a shining sword swordsman, and the situation was quite dangerous. He wanted to save them, but Fang Yuan only hesitated for a moment before flying towards the gap behind the sword cultivator. Before he could even fly half a meter above the battlefield, the bird cultivators with sharp eyes in the sky had already seen him. Two tall and thin bird cultivators looked at each other, before flapping their wings and swooping down. Their target was Fang Yuan. However, at this moment, about 10 feet below Fang Yuan, a swordsman of about grade 5 had just killed a foundation establishment cultivator in front of him. He raised his head and saw Fang Yuan's figure. A sinister smile appeared on his face as he formed a sword seal in his hand. A sword light as thin as a strand of hair flew towards Fang Yuan silently, reflecting the various colors of the battlefield. Fang Yuan saw that there were actually 2 bird cultivators attacking him together in the sky. He was greatly shocked and quickly used his flying technique to escape in another direction. After flying for about 20 feet, he felt a strange movement. Before he could use his divine sense to check carefully, there was a flash of light in his chest. A flying sword as thin as a strand of hair had broken through his defensive light and pierced straight into his body. Fang Yuan could only barely move his body to the side. That flying sword had already pierced through his chest. With a miserable cry, he fell down from the sky. The 2 bird cultivators saw this and spread their wings, flying into the sky to be on guard again. That sword cultivator who killed them swept his gaze with a cold gaze, ignoring them and stabbing at others with his sword. Sword light flashed, reaping the lives of cultivators one after another. With a series of explosions, the lives of sword cultivators were wiped out one after another. Fang Yuan was only an insignificant one among them. Seeing that the battle was already decided, Yuan Qing retracted his gaze and looked down at the black hole below him. He then raised his head and looked at Ling Yunwu and the rest who were scattered all over the battlefield, transmitting his divine sense. "Friend Ling Jian, the cultivators that you are looking for, I'm afraid that they are the same as the Golden Core stage cultivators in Jin Quan Mountain, hiding under this defensive array. If you want to force them out, it would be better if Friend Ling and the other sword friends of the Ling Feng sword sect work together to break this defensive array." Ling Yunwu's divine sense swept over and thought for a while before smiling. "Fine. I have been watching this farce for so many days. If I don't make a move, it would show that Ling Feng's sword sect doesn't know the rules. Saying so, Ling Yunwu waved his hand and the flying swords under the feet of the dozen illusory sword cultivators flew out. The swordsmen raised their hands and held the flying swords in their hands. One wang. With a series of sword cries, the swordsmen's bodies turned illusory and gradually transformed into flying swords of different shapes. Immediately after, dozens of flying swords rushed into the air, and a powerful sword intent swept through the entire battlefield. Not only did the flying swords of the swordsmen tremble slightly, but they also bowed down. Even the cultivator's true essence was suppressed, and all kinds of magic tools and treasures fell from the sky. However, this only lasted for a short moment before the powerful sword intent retracted into the huge swords. The huge swords formed by the dozen illusory sword cultivators actually danced in the air slowly. Although it wasn't as strong as the old man who transformed into a sword back at Chicken Crow Mountain, the sharp edge of the sword was enough to tear apart a nascent soul cultivator. Woo! The huge sword slowly pierced into the black hole. The surrounding spiritual chi of heaven and earth was pierced through. Small hurricanes formed around the huge sword, blowing the swordsmen and cultivators who were fighting each other off their feet. Rumble! The earth quaked and the entire ground trembled. Cracks of a few feet wide and thousands of feet deep appeared on the ground of Golden Spring Mountain, splitting the entire ground apart. Great! Yuan Qing's divine sense swept over and he clapped his hands and laughed. The defensive formation of Quanjin Mountain has been destroyed. Many thanks to the sword cultivators of Ling Feng's sword sect. You're welcome. Ling Yunwu and the rest revealed themselves and immediately used their divine senses to scan the area under the restriction. Naturally, Ling Yunwu's divine sense was also blocked by the special layer of soil of Quanjin Mountain and was unable to penetrate. At this time, thousands of cultivators rushed out from the black hole that had just been destroyed. The one leading them was naturally Tu Hong. Tu Hong did not hold a spear in his hand, but a triangular-shaped magic tool. Old fool Yuan Qing. Do you dare to fight with this old man again? Tu Hong shouted arrogantly as soon as he appeared. Haha, this Yuan has been waiting for you for a long time. Yuan Qing laughed as he heard this. The flying sword under his feet flew up and immediately turned into a round sun that pierced towards Tu Hong. Tu Hong was already prepared. He pointed his finger at the triangular-shaped magic tool and a bright light flew out from the magic tool and rushed towards the blazing sun. Kill! Lan Xian and the rest were naturally on the side. Without waiting for Tu Hong's orders, they all stimulated their magic power and rushed towards Ying Chao and the other high-level swordsmen. Hee. How could Ying Chao put these late Foundation establishment cultivators in his eyes? With a loud scream, the bird cultivators in the air swooped down and began to fight with the cultivators. Tu Hong's light was very fierce. As soon as it touched Yuan Qing's flying sword, it extinguished the flames on the flying sword, leaving behind only a foot-long flying sword body. Oh? Yuan Qing was also a little shocked, but there was more to come. After the clear light destroyed the flames, it did not stop. It continued to corrode the body of the flying sword. In the blink of an eye, small brown dots were born from the sound of the flying sword. You dare! Yuan Qing's heart ached. He knew that his flying sword had been damaged and he would have to spend a great deal of effort to repair it. Although it wasn't as humiliating as last time, the price he had to pay was far more disastrous. Yuan Qing was furious. He had suffered defeat again and again in front of Tu Hong, and now in front of the other sword cultivators of Heavenly Sword region. At this time, he wanted to kill Tu Hong with a single sword strike. But what was strange was that Tu Hong's eyes swept over and he pointed at the triangular-shaped magic tool. The magic tool began to emit an overwhelming light. This light not only covered Yuan Qing, but also Ying Chao, Li Min, Ling Yunwu, and the others. Ignorant cultivator! Ying Chao was furious. His body suddenly swayed, and 2 wings appeared on his back. His whole body shot up into the sky and flashed past the light. Ling Yunwu and the others didn't dare to be negligent. They stepped on their flying swords and rushed up into the sky. Without knowing the details, they didn't dare to be as reckless as Yuan Qing. Don't go! When Yuan Qing saw Tu Hong's arrogant behavior, he had already guessed what he was thinking. When he saw Tu Hong release the light and fly in another direction, he immediately shouted. Ying Chao, Ling Yinwu, and the others were naturally alert. They flew up and surrounded Tu Hong. Tu Hong's body flew rapidly, but he still couldn't escape from the encirclement. When he saw the others taking out their flying swords, he quickly pointed at the magic tool again. But this time, the light from the magic tool only flew out a thin layer and stopped. Tu Hong frowned. It seemed that the magic tool wasn't suitable for him. Forget it! Tu Hong's expression changed slightly. He shouted, Disciples of the Dao sect, we will retreat back to the Spirit Stone Mine. There are still a few defensive arrays inside. We will resist stubbornly and kill the swordsmen in the mine. Yes! Hearing this, the disciples of Golden Spring Mountain shouted in unison. Then Tu Hong pointed at the triangular-shaped magic tool again. A tricolored light rushed to the ground, and another burst of light appeared. -8. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.